All right. So we should be live now. Let's see. Just going to set up this live stream quick as people start to come in. So a little bit of just like an impromptu live stream today. So, all right, let me set this up and then I will just kind of give you guys the plan for today. One second. Okay. So the plan for today in this live stream is going to be talking about the modern Pokemon market, comparing a little bit to elements of the vintage Pokemon market, going into probably some numbers, some data, answering a lot of questions, maybe even if anyone from chat wants to come on, if you want to send me a message on Instagram, maybe bringing some guests on, some people on to talk about the subject, whoever's in the mood to talk about it. And I'll repeat that later on when we have more people watching. But and let me see. Let me just pull up the chat here again. Let's see if people are coming in. Again, it's an impromptu stream, so I know it'll take a minute for people to find it. And I'll repeat that later on when we have more people. Okay, here we go. All right, so we got some people in the chat and some more people coming in. Swami says that he'd love to come on. Yeah, just send me a message on Instagram and I'll bring you. I'll send you a message. And invite you on. So before doing that, I just want to, I guess, preface this with my general opinion on just like the state of this conversation and what I see from people online. So I think the majority of people understand that this is a complex Pokemon market. There really isn't such a thing as this is modern, this is vintage. When people talk about modern and vintage, the modern market is complex. There are very rare items in modern, everything from very rare promos, trophies to pretty rare set cards like alt arts, secret rares, to very, very common regular holos, reverse holos, all that sort of thing. Same thing in vintage. There's very not rare first editions or even unlimited commons and uncommons to regular holos to secret rares, even in the Wizards of the Coast with your shinings, or into the original Nintendo EX era with your gold stars. So when we talk about vintage versus modern, generally speaking, the conversation should be a little bit more nuanced about what are we really referring to? What are we really talking about? There's a big difference between a modern regular holo and a vintage regular holo in terms of when we talk about vintage specifically here, let's talk about the original Nintendo EX era, or a Diamond and Pearl era, or an E-Series era, or even a base Jungle Fossil, which is going to be less rare than some of those other things. But those cards, because of 20 years of attrition, and probably other than your sort of base set unlimited, all these sets have been printed much, much less. There's going to be many less of those holos than your regular holos from sets today. But as we know, sets today have lots of different rarity levels, including some very rare cards that are very difficult to pull, particularly when the set is huge. And so the rarity of said cards, said modern cards versus some vintage cards, it's unclear, and we don't know the print runs on modern, and then we don't know the print runs on vintage, or how much vintage stuff is left out there. But there's just so much we don't know, and yet there are a lot of strong opinions about this is what everyone loves, this is the best thing to invest in, or this is what everyone loves, this is the best thing to invest in. And I think that everyone kind of needs to just like take a breath, or a lot of people. I think the majority of people understand what I'm saying here, but I think that there's a group of people who are very much everything modern's terrible or everything's vintage is terrible, rather than having a little bit more of like a mathematical, nuanced approach to trying to figure some of these questions out, understanding that because we don't know the print runs, it's not something that's going to be possible to do at this day and age with any confidence. And the best we can sort of do is look at pop reports. So when we think about modern, there's a conversation that we can have around modern singles and modern graded. And then there's a conversation we can have around modern sealed. I do think that at this time, I don't think it should be a radical idea or surprising idea that modern, ultra modern sort of sword and shield era, particularly I'm going to say Evolving Skies, or let's say Battle Styles, Chilling Reigns, Evolving Skies, and on, is going to be your most risky singles market, your most risky, particularly graded market, buying graded. And we can go into why that is pretty soon with some of the data. But just to kind of hit some of the high points of that, because PSA has been closed, and was basically closed for the majority of cards from these sets, outside of your cards that might reach $500, $600, $700 in value in a PSA 10. Because it's been closed, the vast majority of these cards have not been graded. If you compare Evolving Skies, Chilling Reign, Battle Styles, the amount of cards that have been graded and the amount of cards that continue to be graded each week, even now with prices now down to $50 to grade, if you can get into the lottery, it's still a huge difference with how much Vivid Voltage has already been graded and how much continues to be graded. A set that people were able to get a lot of cards in before the price increase, and particularly when you also add CGC into that. This means that cards like the Umbreon VMAX that is selling for about 600 to 800, maybe 600 to 700, 600 to 750, maybe in a PSA 10 from Evolving Skies, the alt art. Buying that in a PSA 10 is one of the most risky purchases you could make right now. And I'm going to explain why. So now, risk does not mean that you won't make money, okay? And that it can't go up, or that it won't even be a good investment in the long run. Risk just means it's very volatile. It's very hard to predict. And I would argue that at this time, there's enough negatives to a card like that it doesn't make sense to take that sort of risk. But in the long run, I really have no idea how that card's going to do. That card could do extremely well in the long run, and I'll get into all of that. So far, a card like that has something like 550 graded PSA 10 copies, somewhere in that, and only 50 PSA 9, showing that it's an extremely easy card to get in 10. And this is a pattern. I've looked at maybe 40 to 50 chase cards from these sets, and barring a few exceptions, it's a very similar pattern. That sort of 10 to 1 PSA 10 to PSA 9 ratio is so unheard of in any other era in Pokemon, including Sun and Moon. What that means is that, just speaking rationally, what that means is that you'd think that the consumers, once they become aware of that or realize that, would pay less of a premium for PSA 10 than in every other era in Pokemon. So I just want to throw that data point out there to start. Now there are going to be exceptions to this. There are going to be exceptions where I saw some like the Tyranitar, the Altar Tyranitar from Battle Styles, which is a 3-to-1 PSA 10s. I think it was like 150 PSA 10s to 50. Okay. So granted, these are not humongous sample sizes, and we can say that people are self-selecting at these higher prices to only send in the best possible cards. And so they're getting a higher 10 rate than fresh out of pack. I think that's very reasonable. At the same time, that's probably true across every era, and definitely the Sun and Moon era. And in the Sun and Moon era, we're still seeing, 3-to-1s, generally 2-to-1s, sometimes 1-to-1, 10-to-9. Sometimes we're seeing 50%. 10s to, we're seeing double the amount of 9s to 10s. In some cases, there are even some cards that have even less than that. Now, when we compare that to, vintage Wizards of the Coast, original Nintendo EX era, it's a much, and then even more so in sort of the Diamond and Pearl era, Black and White era, early X and Y era, into even sets like Evolutions, to middle or later XY, it's just a whole different ballgame. And it's very unprecedented to see how the market is going to respond to all of this. Now, so far, PSA 10s are selling very well from these sets, from like Evolving Skies and from some of the newer sets. However, earlier Sword and Shield sets that have had a lot of cards graded already, we've already seen just the sheer amount of supply really bring the value down on some cards. And a couple of good examples are from the base set Sword and Shield, the Zamazenta, Zacian gold cards, which I think are really cool cards. Those cards were up around $200, $300, $400 in PSA 10 when they were first selling. And now they're down to, I'm buying them at around 40 to 60. With some even slipping like high 30s on a rare occasion in an auction. Maybe buy it now, we're talking 60 to 80. So that's a humongous fall from that $400 price. And part of the reason why I believe that is it has a very similar ease to grade. Not quite as easy as this Umbreon VMAX, which has a 10-to-1, which is unbelievable, but it's still very easy to grade in 10, very, very easy, but they're already over 1,000 graded in PSA 10. Now, the demand for those cards is certainly going to be a lot less than the Umbreon. One thing that makes all of this, to go back to my initial point, which is why it's so risky and hard to predict, is the demand is so high, we think, right now, for like that Umbreon VMAX. I think right now, it's certainly one of, if not my favorite alt art. I think a lot of people share that sentiment. It's really cool looking. Of course, not everyone is going to feel that way, but it's definitely one of the most popular ones. And because of that really high demand, I think that these numbers right now are basically being ignored and thrown out, which is totally understandable. I think the same types of stuff happened with Evolutions, and we've seen when there's just really, really high demand for stuff, even if there's a lot more PSA 10s or there's quite a bit of supply, it just gets eaten up ravenously because there's just so much interest. Now, what can happen is that all of a sudden that can switch and there just aren't more buyers, or it stops stonking up, or there are a lot of like investor speculators doing buyouts, which I know there are on this card. And people have told me that they've done buyouts earlier on or doing, some small buyouts on the way up. We just don't know where that tipping point is going to be. And I believe that people are going to continue grading that card. And when PSA opens up, I think they're going to be grading that card even more probably. Now, what's also very interesting about this is that even if we think this is a good investment because it's going to have such high demand because it's such a great card, which is possible, and it's just going to continue, even though it has those percentages, it's so easy to grade, and there probably so much more of it's going to be graded, and we're just sort of seeing the tip of the iceberg, and there'll probably be thousands more of that card graded, in the next few years. Even if that's the case, the demand is just going to be so high that's going to continue to eat up the supply. The other weird thing, though, that we're seeing is how cheap the ungraded versions of these cards are on like TCG Player and elsewhere, and how people were buying these up at like $150 to $200 to $300, or the Tyranitar I think is like $60 to $80 right now, and how you can buy them and then grade them, and if they get a 10, you can like make $200-300 immediately, $400 immediately, $500 even, depending on your grading fee and the cost that you got into it, on the Umbreon right now. And if you get a 9, you're still going to make a couple $100. Now that will not last. Okay. And part of what happens is when a lot of buyers realize that there's money to be made, or excuse me, when a lot of like flippers realize that there's opportunity like that, and they see how I can, for basically no work, and at this $50 tier, people are getting their cards back, in a month and a half, 2 months, even less. I've heard from some people. So it's quick. And you could even pay for an even more premium service, maybe get it back even quicker. I don't know right now. And still there'd be quite a margin on a card like that. Part of what happens is there's a run up on price, which then causes more people to see it, more people to jump in, more people to make videos, more people to say, wow, this really is a valuable card. This really is a great card, which causes more FOMO. And that's when you see these prices ladder. So you see a lot of sort of investor, speculator, flippers jump into something, push it way up. Maybe definitely some collectors too, who are like, I really want this card for my collection. I'm worried I'm going to get priced out of it, all these types of things. And that creates this moment where cards can get very, very overvalued. And when I say overvalued, I mean that there are not a humongous group of people interested in actually owning that card at that price. It's a lot of people. It's more people who see the opportunity to grade it and then flip it and sell it. And so it's unclear how long that's going to last. Now, on a card like that, the trajectory is definitely still going up. So there might be still room left to go. And I have no ability to predict any of this. And demand is such an impossible thing to predict in Pokemon and for these cards that all you need to know really is just the risk and understand how that works, and that you're basically banking on the fact that there's just going to be continued fervor, continued demand, and that's going to continue to increase because the supply is sort of against you. The supply will continue to grow. And I do think that a lot of people bought up a number of those and are still getting them back and trying to sell them into the market right now. And although I do think they're being absorbed now at higher and higher prices, it's unclear how that's going to last. Now, that's one example, but there are 20 to 30 examples that fit that mold in sort of this Sword and Shield block. Most of these alt arts, most of these rainbow rare, like the Charizard, the Brilliant Stars has a number of these cards that are following a very similar trajectory. Selling for way over a very similar card from Sun and Moon, which has a similar or even smaller pop in some cases, and has a much better 10-to-9 ratio, and is older, and the booster box is more expensive. So there's a lot of what I would deem as a rationality to some extent. But at the end of the day, markets can stay irrational or be irrational, and it's all supply and demand. And there are only 550 some of these in PSA 10, and it's an extremely beautiful card and an extremely popular card. So if you just look at it in a vacuum, well, there are only 550 of these. Maybe $700, $800 makes sense. But if you add all this other stuff, you can see how risky it is as a speculator, as an investor. If you're going to get into this, it makes much more sense to buy the raw, try to grade it, get the 10 yourself for your collection, or flip it. Of course, that makes much more sense for people who understand how that works. When you see those types of margins on 9s and 10s, it's just an incredible opportunity. And I do think that what's interesting is who is buying up the already graded cards. That's the part that I always get confused about. And I just wonder how deep that market's going to be. And as I've said, like on those Asian and Zamazenta, just as one example, there are plenty of examples already, and we've seen lots of examples in Sun and Moon, and plenty of examples already in some of the earlier Sword and Shield sets into Champion's Path and Vivid Voltage. We've already seen, and Shining Fates, we've already seen a large retraces on some of the key cards from those sets because the supply just eventually overwhelmed the demand. Again, on a card like this, I have no idea. So hopefully that makes sense for people. So that's why I would be careful with these things and really try to understand the nuances of how that works, and probably, yeah, just be careful. You don't want to get pinched. I do think though that I'm very interested to see. So let me put it this way. So I do think that in general, these cards are pretty expensive, and even the ungraded raw, when we put aside the fact that you can buy them and then flip them and make a huge profit, that's completely understandable why people are buying these and then grading them and then are able to sell them. As far as a collector, as far as someone like me, when I know that I can buy much, much rarer stuff, rare secret rares from like the diamond and pearl black and white era, when these booster boxes are selling for $1,000 or $2,000 or $4,000, and I can buy those graded at around the same price or less than some of these alt arts, raw or even graded, that begs the question of why is demand so high for these sets and so low for some of these rare periods? And is that going to sustain itself? And that's something I have no way to answer. Okay. At the end of the day, I don't think it will sustain itself personally, because I think that the most modern sets right now are just the ones being talked about most on YouTube. They're the ones in most backgrounds, are the ones being opened by PokeRev and by all the big YouTubers every day and talked about. And I think as soon as we get into the next era, that's all everyone's going to talk about, are the next cool sets from there. And then the popularity of these will die down. The exact same thing that happened with like Hidden Fates, et cetera. And then you might see resurgences, where people hated sets like Generations and now people really like Generations. Like you might see some of these sets resurge at different times. But the price points are just unprecedented. To buy these like modern chase Pokemon cards for $200 raw is just pretty unprecedented, particularly when you're talking about a non-Charizard. So we'll just have to see how that sustains itself. But I think that you're taking quite a big risk also, because I believe that there's just a lot more Sword and Shield supply than there are Sun and Moon supply. I believe there's a lot more Sword and Shield that's going to be printed, that has been printed, and that will continue to be printed, and a lot more unopened and stored away. Okay, which leads us into our next category of sealed. Does it make sense to invest or speculate on modern sealed? And I guess before jumping into that, and then I do want to bring some people on. Let me go back to the chat. I haven't been looking at chat at all. Open it back up here. Give me a second. One second. Let's see how we're doing here. Sorry, just open this up. Okay, we've got it open back up. All right. So Nostalgianomics says, my point is, who can say what is a rational or irrational purchase? So I would say it's irrational to say that we have two Charizards of the same rarity, or two things of the same rarity from different periods. One is much rarer, one is older. We can say, well, people like the new art better and people are going to like the new art forever. You're just getting into these sort of difficult, where you're sort of arguing against numbers and math. And you're saying, well, people just like the new stuff so much more that rarity doesn't even matter. And you can argue that, you can make that point and say, just because the booster boxes of Diamond and Pearl era or something are going for $5,000, and the cards inside, there are cards inside, that are going for $200, that are much significantly so much rare. I mean, we're talking about like so much rare than these alt arts that are brand new, and still a million more are going to be opened. Not a million more different kinds, but of that specific kind, maybe, 20,000 more are going to be opened or something, 15,000 maybe, over the long period of time. That's just so much less rare that it becomes a situation, Alex, or anyone, where you have to just say that card is just so much better subjectively in terms of your opinion on the art and people wanting it. And that I cannot disagree with. But that's what I mean by, like, what you do as an investor is you try to find rational arguments for why something should be more valuable than others. You don't just say, well, people like this better, and it's always going to be that way, and I'm just going to buy what I think people like. I mean, that's very, like, fine if you can do that successfully, but it's just not a very difficult, like, for anyone, right? And this isn't just meant to be at you. I just don't understand why this is a debated thing. And it's absolutely fine to be like, and I made this point a number of times today, right? Where the demand for a card like the Umbreon could always just be so much higher than the demand for, the prime Umbreon or something, let's throw out there, that the demand for that altar might just be so much higher forever that it doesn't matter that one is much rare. And I agree with you. It wouldn't matter. I 100% agree with that. I just think that you're taking a big risk and a big gamble. And wouldn't it make rational sense that the card that everyone's talking about and showing is going to be the one that everyone wants right now? And how is that going to do when the next generation of cards? And one thing that I think is sort of missed in this whole modern versus vintage debate is, like, if you think, or anyone out there thinks, that that for some reason Sword and Shield is going to be the most popular sets of all time beyond the next generation or the next generation or the next generation, I don't know what you're basing that off of. It's just quite a claim. I think it's probably more likely that it's just the most popular right now, and that probably the next generation will be more popular at the time than Sword and Shield. Now, in 10 to 15 to 20 years or whatever, 5 years to 10 years, I don't know what'll be the most popular and which eras will be the most popular. Again, there's so many examples where things were extremely unpopular that then became very popular, and examples where things were very popular that then became unpopular. So that's where the rationality comes in. Okay. So I just hope that, I just feel like we all should be able to agree on this stuff. So again, I'm not telling people what they should like. Okay. Again, there's let's see here. Yeah, Nostalgianomics says rarity only matters if people want the item, no matter what we are talking about. Absolutely. I mean, if people don't want the item, they don't want the item. But then the question is, why do people want things? And if we look at the history of collectibles, people tend to want things that are fairly historically significant within the hobby. So first appearances, key legend cards, key, mythicals, legendaries, starters, very, very popular Pokemon, or key sets that were really, really popular at the time, potentially like an Evolving Skies or a Hitting Fates or Brilliant Stars. I mean, there are things I really like about these things. Okay, so let's go into Modern Sealed here a little bit. So with Modern Sealed, definitely a lot less risky, a lot less volatile, in my opinion, than Modern Singles and Graded. I guess one thing before I jump into that. So I am buying some. So for example, just as, as I said, I'm buying some of those Gold Star dogs. So even though there's 1,000 in PSA 10 at $40, $30, $50, I think they're freaking amazing cards. I think that they're the key legendaries of this era. I think they're great looking, and I'm buying them, in my opinion, quite cheap, and they've already come down from $200, $300, $400 all the way down to that price. And I like picking up a few of that type of thing at that price point. I'm also buying, I bought Evolving Skies booster boxes at like 95 to 100, Chilling Reign Battle Styles at like 72. I bought a bunch of like, I bought some Brilliant Stars and some Crimson Invasion and some Sun and Moon and a bunch of other stuff, Sun and Moon base. So now when I buy this stuff, I'm really looking, my viewpoint on all of these products is that there is absolutely no rush. And you can definitely skip sets. You could skip whole generation. You could skip the whole era, and that would be fine, in my opinion. And again, it has a lot more to do with sort of, this is just my opinion, everyone's personal financial situation, but there's just no rush. And please do not be putting yourself in any sort of difficult this is my opinion, financial situation, because you're viewing holding these sealed products like so many people are, as some sort of like humongous, amazing opportunity that's going to be like better than just putting your money in the stock market, in long-term, securities. So, I don't know what's going to happen with these. I've talked about it before. I think that if I had to put a number to it, if I was absolutely forced to put a number to it, and then I'll explain the number, I would say that I think I'm 40% or so confident. Again, and this is just my feelings on it, my opinions on it from being in the hobby for years and watching this sort of stuff and studying other hobbies. I'm going to say a 40-ish% confident that in 3 to 5 years, a lot of these booster boxes will have gone up at least 50 to 100% in value. A lot of the products that I bought, 50 to 100% in value. I would say there's like a 40% or so chance, which is like really good, right? That's really high chance. Okay. I think that there's probably a 40-ish percent chance that they have not moved at all. And then I've basically lost money. Because if I were to sell after shipping, fees, inflation, maybe, what have you, I would have lost 10% after selling them. And in 3 to 5 years, they're sitting at the exact same prices now. So we're talking, in my opinion, a 90 to 95% chance probably that one of those two things will likely happen. And I actually think it's about a 50% chance of each. Just to be completely upfront with people. Part of the reason I like buying the sealed stuff is also just to display it, because it makes me happy to look at it every day. I'm not buying this stuff to get rich. I'm not buying because I think these are going to be like amazing products. They're going to make me a ton of money. I'm buying them because it makes me happy to look at them every day. I can always open them and really enjoy them. And then if they go up a lot in value, maybe I'll sell a couple and open one probably, now that I was able to get it at a cheaper price. That's my honest thinking about it. I think there's a very small chance, 5 to 10% chance that Pokemon really takes a massive hit, that this era, and I'm going to put it maybe at 10%, that this era, we're going to look back in 5 to 10 years and say this whole Sword and Shield block was so overprinted beyond the actual demand or interest in Pokemon, and the demand or interest in Pokemon's waned after this period, and that these products actually go down to more like $60, $50 a box even. I put maybe very low percent chance, right? So because of all of that, that's why I buy some. Okay. But I do not view these things as like some sort of excellent investment, some sort of surefire guaranteed investment. And I would highly encourage nobody out there to view them that way. Everyone's going to have their opinion. That is my strong opinion. I think when you do that, you just have a lot more fun. You don't get hurt. And if you make money, awesome. And I hope everyone here makes money and they all go up and the Pokemon hobby grows over time. And I hope all the channels talking about that all the stuff's going to go up are right. And we're, that would be great. But but I feel like I, have some responsibility to say exactly my perspective on the matter. For some reason, the chat has not been working. Okay. Let's see what we got on the chat. Yeah, I mean, to sort of summarize, I guess, my general feelings on this stuff is I think that there are people who are too bullish, there are people who are too bearish right now. And it feels, just as I said, 50-50 to me. It's 50-50 whether we go back for me to like the sun and moon era when nothing went up for 3 to 5 years, and then I'm not sure we'll ever see huge explosive growth again like we saw at the what saved, we could say, people who were investing in that product, although most of them probably sold out before it ever went up, was the fact that everything just exploded in 1 year. I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again. We might just see items really sit. I mean, there are plenty of 10, there are 5-year-old, 10-year-old magic boxes that have, barely moved at all. We could be looking at that. And then of course I've given plenty of examples of, dead CCGs or sports boxes or other sorts of things that have, due to overprinting and then also a decrease in demand and a decrease in interest of that specific time period, have gone down to $15, $5, $10 clearance, type sale items. We're an extremely long way from that. And of course that would be, unprecedented. That would be an unprecedented disaster and very unlikely in something like Pokemon, where I think they would probably recognize that and quickly, reduce the printing size, and we'd probably be okay. I don't think they just keep printing Pokemon into the ground where it, where the hobby really got damaged. I don't see that coming. So I think that often, like, I view myself as sort of like a very like middle of the road, what I think of as my perspective and opinion on this sort of stuff. We have very, very bearish voices who yell at me and say, it's the whole thing's a pump and dump scheme. Pokemon's a joke, collective. No one likes this stuff. It's all investors. It's all speculators. And I think that's very pessimistic and is not the reality. And then, we have sort of voices who I feel are saying, these are very sure things. I would expect very consistent, steady growth over time. And, to be completely honest with you, like I actually find those voices pretty comparable. Like in terms of like, there really is not a lot of data for each. I mean, I guess that it's not comparable in the sense that I think it depends how bullish you're saying. But and to be fair, the negative people tend to be the more tinfoily hat conspiracy-ish, who are sort of like, all companies are bad, all money is bad, everyone's negative, everyone's out to get me, everyone's a scam, everyone's evil in this hobby, and that is so exhausting to deal with and just irritating and negative. And so I tend to prefer the overly positive message. I guess if I had to listen to one of those two messages, now to kind of take back what I said before, but I also, it irks me, because it's just unnecessary. Some of those like overly positive messages, like you can make your great pro points without having that feeling of like you're guaranteeing, or having feeling like you're being attacked. Like often I feel like it gets into this sort of like straw man-y area of like, we're fighting the good fight for modern, and I get it because some vintage, like only people are so obnoxious. Like, trust me, I get that to some degree, but like the vast majority of people don't feel that way. So you don't like, I would just say ignore that, that sort of mentality. You know, would I be, so when we think about like what is going to be the best investment in all of Pokemon, what should you invest in? What's going to do the best? I have no, I don't want to say I have no idea because I have lots and lots of ideas, but all of my different ideas and all of the different things that I'm doing, I only have certain percentages of confidence. So I hope, like, when I broke it down, like, I think 40% chance this happens, 40% chance this happens, 10% chance this happens. That is, in my opinion, what a reasonable investor, what an investment actually looks like. Okay. Most things in life are going to be like that when you're investing. And that's also why there's this fallacy of like every investor gets everything right or needs to get everything right, or every, 40% of the time in this equation, because I've put 40, and 10, each one of those three things, it has a smaller than 50% of chance happening in my head. And so for me to say which one of those things is going to happen, I don't really know. And so I'm basing the amount of money that I'm putting in on these things and my general risk tolerance based on those percentages that I place on that item. Okay. I have my percentages that I place on Pokemon as a whole. I have percentages that I place on individual items. And that's how I come up with my specific buying points. And I am buying a lot of things in the Sword and Shield era, in the Sun and Moon, in X and Y, in Black and White, in Diamond and Pearl. I buy things in every era. It all depends on price point. And I like to wait for when things get unpopular and when things really crash. And that's been very successful for me. I like to identify really good items. And this is going to sound like common sense, but believe it or not, this is not what I think is intuitive for us as human beings often, but I like to identify really good items and then wait for a lot of pessimism on those things. So I like to buy the best items for as cheap as possible. And, it gets into this interesting conversation of, should you buy the best items a little bit cheap, or should you buy like decent items extremely cheap that Ava and I talked about in our stream, which is a long-term Warren Buffett debate. There is no correct answer to that, honestly, either. A lot of that depends on how much money you have and your preferences. So generally speaking, when you have a lot more money to invest, and this is not just in Pokemon cards, but just in life in general, you're going to be wanting to look for bigger companies, bigger assets, bigger items, because it's going to take you a lot less time to just get that money in an investment and probably take you a lot less time to get it out. And that, like, whereas you could find like a lot of amazing, really cheap cards, but you probably couldn't put $100,000 into like really cheap modern Pokemon cards. You probably could only put in $1,000 or so before you just be buying up everything and bidding yourself up, right? Whereas buying trophy cards in Pokemon, you might only be able to afford one trophy card at that price, and then you're not going to be bidding yourself up or having to like find 10 or 15 of that card, for example. And that's something that's also important when you think about, how much money you want to put in, and then you're, are you doing a buyout and really just kind of buying yourself out and bidding up against yourself, and there isn't that much interest, for it, and the prices are only going up because you're buying all the copies. There's a lot of risk in those sorts of things. So I don't know what's going on with the chat, but the chat is not working. Yeah, the other really interesting thing, and I do want to make a video on this, and I'm thinking about maybe I want to do one of my Patreon monthly like deep analytic dives into this topic at some point. I really want to take a much deeper look in Japanese versus English, and Japanese modern versus English modern. And there's a lot of strangeness in the prices. Booster boxes going for more than English booster boxes, but then set singles and set graded cards going for less. than the English counterparts, and it's very strange, and I'm not really sure what to make of it. And at the end of the day, the answer is just demand, right? That there's just a lot more demand right now for Japanese sealed. There's a lot more demand and less supply for, some sort of equation there for Japanese sealed, and a lot less demand and for some reason enough supply or more than enough supply for some Japanese singles from certain sets, which is very interesting why people really like Japanese sealed but don't like Japanese singles that much, modern singles. Interesting. And, that could be because, there's this idea out there that Japanese booster boxes is the best investment because they're going to be less of those printed, which we don't really know. I think that really used to be the case. Now I really don't have any sense now that they're willing to do reprints and other sorts of things and print a lot more Japanese. I don't know if that's going to really repeat itself. Like if we're ever going to see, Shiny Star V see the types of quick gains that Shiny GX did, or that even to more extent like CP6, Poke and some of these sets that seem to be printed, considerably less. It's very interesting. But even in like a CP6, like a lot of the graded CP6 hollows are like crazy cheap, like $10-15 for PSA 9s of like a Gyarados or a Chansey, or like, whereas like the evolutions, it might be like 20-25, even though the evolutions regular hollows are insanely common because there were so much more evolutions printed, it seems, and so on the English side, and so much more of it circulated, and so much more of it graded. I mean, it's crazy how much more evolutions is graded than CP6. So it shows, you'd think how much demand there is for evolutions. I don't like demand because for me, demand works well in the short term. Demand works well for momentum investing, but demand is very difficult to predict, as I will continue to repeat on this channel. And I think you will see that will be very, very right in the long run, that you're going to see lots of changes in demand. You're going to see vintage certain vintage things being very popular, then certain modern things being very popular, then other vintage things being very popular. And take it from someone who's been in the hobby a while, even in this, almost 7 years that I've been doing this, it's insane how people just completely change their opinions, like 180s on things. And that's why I'd much rather understand the demand, and understand what I mean by understand the demand is, like in sports, it's rookie cards. And I understand rookie is just something that is, it's autographed, it's serialized, it's, so in Pokemon, it's rarity, right? It's the inserts, it's the more difficult chase cards to pull. It's the, maybe the full art versions, the VMAX, the whatever it is, right? And that is a lot more, that is the objective truth. How much you like the art or how much you like the Pokemon can shift and change over time. So, and I would rather buy low on Pokemon. So for example, like Zacian Zamazenta, I think if you're buying into that, you're buying low. I think that Pokemon, now that Pokemon could get less popular because once we get out of this era, people are like, I don't really care about this era. I don't care about that Pokemon, and I prefer the new legendaries, of the next few generations. That can absolutely happen. But I do think that, as long as kids today are into it, adults and people are continuing to play the video games, I think that give these Pokemon some age to them, a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit of, I remember, those games. I remember those Pokemon. You might see those items really, those Pokemon, I should say, really move up in overall popularity. Where something like Charizard, I think is already so popular. I'm not going to say it's overvalued or anything. I have no way of judging that, and it could easily just remain sort of at the top of its popularity. But I think that, sometimes it's best looking at things that are maybe a little under the radar, a little undervalued, a little overlooked. That's what I would say on all of that. Again, my chat's not working. I apologize, or I'd be responding to people. Hey, give me 1 second, guys. Hey, sorry about that. I wish I could figure out how to make this work with reading the live chat today. I don't know why it's not working. It's very annoying. I'm going to open it one more time. I'm going to try to pop out the chat and see if that works. Let's see what people are saying. Mm-mm. So let's see what we got here. So Case says what's overprinted will be out of print. And as long as YouTubers keep doing massive breaks, the supply will dry. We don't know how long that will take. We don't know if how far Pokemon would go back and reprint, and we don't know how much supply is already out there. So again, going back to my first one, we just don't know how long that's going to take. I mean, I agree that the positive thing about modern sealed product is that as long as people keep opening it up, eventually it will get rarer and rarer over time. And as long as Pokemon is still popular, there's a very good chance that it will go up in value. You know, the question is just how long and how much. But of course, every single thing has risk, or, you know. I think like the not an issue with that comment, but where my mind goes is that like, it's like, what are you saying? Like, what are you claiming, right? Are you claiming, does that mean I'm going to make 10 to 15% every single year for sure? Like, is that realistic? You know, that's where we might have, I don't know how anybody could guess or quantify that. I think we're in a totally new period in Pokemon and we just don't know what to expect. So I can tell you, people like me, Dan, like when we talk about it, it's like, hey man, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? I think we all kind of agree that we're like, we don't know. You know, we think 40% this, 40% this, 10% this, maybe. People, you know, everyone's percentages are going to be a little bit different, but we're all sort of just waiting to see what happens and go from there. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to open it up and bring some people on. So if anyone wants to come on, let me know. Again, the chat is not really working for me, so I'm going to keep refreshing it to be able to see if people want to come on. I know Swami wanted to come on and said earlier, so I'll send him something, but everyone's welcome to come. Okay, you just have to be, you know, polite. You know, all opinions are welcome. Let's see. Okay, I sent you an invite. I'll send a few other people I saw in chat an invite if they want to come. Yeah, I want to do more of these like impromptu lives, and where I just like, if people want to come on, they can let me know. Send me Instagram messages. We can go from there, type of thing. Um, let's see. All right, send some invites out. Swami's coming in. What's up, man?
Hey, need some better lighting.
All right. So what did you have some points you wanted to make or some things you wanted to share?
Yeah, I'm blinding myself, but yeah, I think it just comes down to expectations. Like investing, the word investing, you think of stocks, you think of making money with your money, and modern, like the risk is so high. Maybe I'm just so conservative, but I don't see it. Like I love modern. I love these cards, but I don't see it as investable. I see maybe people paying a premium in the future to open it and have fun, gamble a little bit, but the graded pops are going to be so high if they're not already. I can see the downside is minimal. It's why I was buying, evolutions packs, booster boxes when it came out, because I was like, this can't go down. And I see that. I just think, like, if you're thinking investing in modern Pokemon, why don't you buy this stuff in like 4 years, or 3 years? I mean, you could buy it at 85. And if it goes to 100, great. You just paid for shipping. You know what I mean? And I get it. I get it with the whole downside. I'm 100% on board. But in terms of investing, I'd be putting my money elsewhere, enjoying the product today, and then maybe in a couple of years buying in, as in like investing. And yeah, just initial thoughts. Hey, nostalgia.
What's up, man?
What's up, Alex? Thanks for joining us. Yeah,
I
I think.
appreciate you having me on, man. I really do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I want to do more call-in style. I also want to have like non-YouTubers on for sure to call in and all sorts of things. Like I want everyone to feel
I
I'm
can
gonna
pop off too. No problem.
I'm gonna have it more organized in the future that I'm gonna like actually be able to do that. Today, I think I'm just gonna go with people I know just for today. But in the future, I really want to get like every person involved who has an opinion and wants to share something. It's the type of thing though, like if you come on and you're super rude, like you're gonna get blocked forever. So just for people to know that, like, but yeah, I mean, I guess my response to that would just be that I don't I don't feel like for me, when I look at this market, I don't see it as there's like good eras and bad eras to buy. Like, so when you start by saying like, I don't think modern Pokemon is like investable. Like, I don't think 99% or 95% of like Pokemon in general is really like a very smart investment. Like from a purely investment strategy, when we take out like the fun and enjoyment element of what we're all doing. I do think that some of the trophy card plays I'm making right now are worth it because the upside is so potentially huge that they might be the only things that really, from my financial perspective, feel like maybe they're going to be really good investments or like decent investments. It's that. And then it's items that I'm getting at super, super cheap in large lots, undervalued already from the market. And even that stuff, I have my doubts. And again, I would go back to like this 40-40-10, but I don't really agree that like I look at modern and I'm just and part of it is because it's vintage is already very expensive as compared to the modern. Like if the vintage was about half the price as it is now, a lot of it, then I would say the vintage is much better valued. But right now, when I look at like Zacian Zamazenta, I'll just, I've talked about that card today, like the gold card, the legendary dogs in a PSA 10, you can buy that for $41. And it's a gold card, and it's difficult to pull. The boxes are already selling for a decent amount, and already graded you can buy for 40. And then the Shining Charizard or something is 15 to 25,000 or something in a PSA 10. I mean, it's such insane differences in price that, like, how can I really look at on a percentage basis and say one is a better investment than the other, particularly when those Shining cards are not that rare. Like, they're not that rare versus like these trophy cards I'm buying, there's 6 of them in the entire world, not graded, but 6 in the world. Right.
Well, and those seem undervalued compared to the Shining Charizard. Right.
I mean, in my opinion, right. But but I will say that when we look at like an Umbreon, like the Umbreon I showed today at $750, $800 PSA 10, that does not look like a good buy for me at this moment, or looks like a risky buy, because that's actually quite a bit of money. You can actually, you're starting to get into, you could buy like first appearances of Pokemon from original WotC PSA 10 first edition that already there's triple the amount of PSA 10s of the Umbreon in the pop report to some of these original Pokemon WotC cards. And that's where you get into demand. And will the demand of the Umbreon just be much higher forever? And that to me does not seem like at all a good argument in the long run, because I think that the first appearances, the original 151 makes a lot more sense, particularly when it's a lot rare, particularly when in 5 to 10 years, you might see 3,000 of those Umbreons all in 10, and you're probably only going to see 400 of some of these other cards that are selling at only $200 for a PSA 10 or $300 for a PSA 10 right now. From
what's the upside? I mean, if it's popped 3,000,
it's tough.
It's so tough to move that price up. Now, demand, like a lot of modern cards are cooler than vintage cards. And I can get behind that argument too. And that the demand will always be higher, but the amount of demand to actually move a price up in terms of investing, the way I think of investing, you would have to have exponentially more demand. And I just don't see it.
And to me, it's subjective, right? Like, I definitely prefer like Jolteon, for example. Like, I'm just going to pull back because that's actually in Jungle. Umbreon, we can't really compare, because to be fair, like the PSA 10 first edition Neo Umbreon is so expensive to compare that it doesn't work. But if we compare like the Jolteon to that, a Jolteon $1,400 in PSA 10 or something, like that card, some of those cards, I way prefer the art, and I'm way more connected to those cards and over the course of my entire life than this Umbreon. That doesn't mean though that other people will be, right? But it also doesn't mean that they won't be. And that's the sort of weird state where we're at, where people are kind of getting into like people just like this better for right now, maybe, will they
know it?
Yeah.
There's a lot more content showing it every day, the modern stuff. It takes time to learn about the older cards anyway.
And I just think it's the hot new thing. And I think that the other point is, like, if you're like, people just like modern now, well, this stuff is not going to be modern for very long. Then it's the new modern. So then you just think that it's always the newest set that's the best? Or is it just the Sword and Shield era that's the best of all time, and it's going to stop here and never going to get better, So go ahead, Alex.
These Altards.
I mean, I had some back and forth, but we also brought you on here.
No, I mean, I don't really have a leg to stand on that. I mean, I don't have anything to add to it. I mean, I think you're both right on that. I mean, I'm also not super excited about any of the modern PSA slabs. I mean, I think it's super risky. It's basically a gamble. I mean, obviously there's tons of money to be made if you're pulling those cards early and getting graded, being the first to grade and get them on the market. But as far as like investing in them for the next, 1, 3, 5 years, I'm the same spot you are. I think it's a super big gamble. My biggest thing is that, I just think there's times in anything in history, like, right. There's times in like the world, like when the internet came out, there's times now with like crypto NFT, there's times in the market now. I just think it's good to remain fluid and be able to shift with the kind of how the market landscapes. And I think, especially me, I grew up, I'm sure a lot the same age as both of you are. I'm 31. And so I grew up with vintage. I grew up, base jungle and fossil. playing red and blue, watching the show. So I am fully entrenched in vintage. Like that's what I care about. I really don't care about a lot of the modern Pokemon, but selling a lot of my collection back in 2020 and then kind of stepping away for a little bit, watching how things are kind of happening. It's allowed me to really change my mindset and really kind of shift how I see the market and how I'm playing the market. And it's just, I think if we get caught up in our own biases on what we think or how other hobbies have performed, you can really miss out on things that are happening right now, because the fact is that the people with the most amount of money in the market, the people with the biggest collections, the people with the most knowledge even, don't run the markets. Masses run the markets. And wherever the masses are going to move, those are the products that are going to see the biggest price rises. So yeah, a vintage slab or, these things might hold value longer. Modern's going to see a lot more of this type of stuff, but at least in the short term, I'm talking short term, maybe 6 months to 2 years, there's so much more opportunity in modern than there is vintage, where you could buy these vintage slabs. You could be sitting on them for 2-3 years with no movement, where you could have, rinse and repeated buying and selling modern items, 10 times by then and done 10 times better. So, I mean, I know Jake's point
that's
of,
tough, man. That's tough.
You think that's tough?
I think modern is
both. I think you can do it in both. Is my honest response is that there's plenty of because really it's just about liquidity. I think there's plenty of liquidity in both right now. I do definitely agree with Alex though, 100%, that like momentum investing is going with the current trends. And so I do agree that there's the most liquidity in your brand new sets. And so Alex is completely right that the most and particularly if you're like an online pack breaker, these types of things, like they're making their most money on Brilliant Stars. Like they're making their most money on the thing that just came out, the thing that people want to open, that they're not really opening for investment, maybe a little, but it's more just the retail person, just the person who wants to see the new cool stuff. And I think there's plenty of
but in terms of the retail person making money on modern, you don't think that's tough? I mean, not an LGS, not a pack breaker. Mm-hmm. Are you going to go? So what's your method? I mean, are you going to go and gamble? And if you open up an Umbreon, you're going to grade it and sell it for 800? Because that's not repeatable, right?
I'm talking about, we're not talking about slabs. I'm talking about sealed product in general.
But so the history of modern, a pandemic is what made those products move XY. Yeah. XY hadn't gone anywhere in 6 years, and only Flashfire had. Furious Fist had moved $15, so the price of shipping. I don't know. Now we're still
you made though for vintage, saying that vintage didn't move for 15 years before Pokemon Go or Evolutions or things started to ramp up. I mean, it's a completely different market now. You can't look back because there's millions more people in it now. Pokemon's more popular than it's ever been.
Right, but you have to look back because if you only look forward, you have no data.
Well, that's like looking back at a vintage card you bought in 2005 and it didn't move until 2015, saying, well, it took 10 years and it didn't do anything.
Well, 2005 is completely different than 2015.
Well, you're both right. You're arguing two different things, and you're both right in the sense that, like, in my opinion, it's sort of like I don't think what Swami is saying is that vintage was better than modern. It was more like nothing was very good.
Yeah, I mean,
now all of a sudden,
you had 8 people actually grading cards for Pokemon. Now, yes, the demand is as high as we've ever seen. You can see the spend is back down. It's above 2019. It's probably going to come in below 2021. But we added a lot of demand, true. But they've also started printing a lot more. My wife's getting home. I'll let you respond. I'll listen, but I'm just going to let her know.
No problem. Yeah, I guess I'm in agreement. So I think like part of what concerns me is, so when you say that, like, okay, the next few sets that come out, right, Alex, like there's going to be random specialty sets like the UPC, which are these like underprinted, extremely popular sets that are kind of like, you should probably buy this if you can, right? And those will periodically come out.
In that set though is done extremely well. I mean, you could have got those under $50. They're selling for $70. If you want to, move cases, I mean, they're making better gains than you would have if you bought a PSA 9, a vintage card at the same time. And it hasn't aged that well in the past 3 to 4 months.
I mean, it depends on the card. I've had Like I bought some PSA 10 first edition jungles and other things that have doubled.
Well, Jake, here, that's another thing I wanted to touch on is every example you always give is based on you finding deals under market value. I'm talking about the market value of the card has not risen that much, where the actual market value of Modern's rising. So yeah, I mean, you can always catch auctions, you can catch better deals. I'm saying if you go look at like what a card is sold for the past 5 auctions, has the price of that card actually rose that much? No, but you know, you may have found a deal where it's done a lot better for you, but the average person can't do that.
I don't know. I mean, the stuff that I do, it just takes scouring eBay and scouring Buy and scouring, like they're not deals I'm getting through like people. I mean, occasionally I will get something through someone reaching out to me, but the vast majority of it isn't that. So
I was talking more like the buying the $25,000 lots and you know, getting all this value out of them. I mean, average person can only afford to buy one card at a time.
But again, there are plenty of things that I've done where I bought $20, $30, $40 cards that I could sell now for 60, 70, 80. You know, I'm doing that all the time. And like so many people are, right? You know, but like someone buying, okay. So what I was trying to say is that the specialty products, I agree with you. I think it's worth it. Okay. In my opinion, I would go a little harder on those. Your like average booster boxes, I'm very mixed on. I'm not like super negative. I'm just sort of like could go up, could stay flat, could go down. It depends on price point for me. Like when I saw those $72 price points and when I saw like the 95, that's what got me to buy it. But over that, I would just pass. But again, part of that is going to be, but it's not a hard pass. It's not a like you're like someone out there who's watching is stupid for buying that. You know, it's more of just a like, I'm not really excited about it. And I do think that these huge double ups, like these evolving skies, like the crazy movement on evolving skies and all of the buying pressure there. I'm not sure if that's the new normal or if that's just going to last for a year or if that's going to be the next 5 years, you know, going back to sort of you and Swami debating that. I have no idea if that is the new normal where Pokemon underprints, continues to underprint the market and you have pretty new boxes selling for like 150, then of course you should buy every single box at 70 to 90, right? If your best boxes are going to 150 and your worst are going to 120, then I'm right there with you. I'm just not sure we've seen enough time to where I feel confident that pattern will be established, but I'm also not saying it won't establish itself. I do though think I would lean on the side that I think Pokemon's going to print the stuff down. And maybe not that set because there's just so many other ones coming out. But I think I would be surprised if Pokemon doesn't just keep going until they get it back down to that, you know, more $90, $100. But then the question is, how quickly can it move up? You know, and will it move up very quickly? And we've seen it move up. We've seen some things move up quite quickly in the last couple of years. It's very interesting. I'm definitely watching, and I'm very open to changing my general strategy. And I will say that I'm a lot more because of the overall increase in Pokemon now. You know, I made a comment, I think now probably a year and a half ago, that I didn't think modern Pokemon was investable. And what that meant is not that you couldn't make money, but that the risk was higher than the reward and that it made more sense to be investing if you're going to invest in vintage. Now I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like there's enough upside everywhere, but it depends where you're looking. It depends what you're going for. That's where I'm at.
I want to respond to that. Hey, everyone's saying to add squeaks if you feel like it.
Yeah.
I sent squeaks. Sean, I sent you the Zoom and Instagram if you want to hop on.
No, I think you're 100% right though. I think people are going to have to be selective when they buy their sets. Yeah. I think if you buy every modern set across the board, you are going to be unhappy. You are going to have a lot of those battle styles, chilling rain type things, I think, happen. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be that extreme, but definitely like no node movement or, you know, downside. But I think if you're selective with the products you buy, you understand the print runs, you understand the demand and popularity behind the items and the cards inside the set. You know, kind of like the whole follow the Charizard theory. It works out like 90% of the time somehow. And, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. And the reason like I talk about those things is it kind of what I was talking about finding those auctions and things is I like to talk about things that are replicable for the average person. So like anyone out there can, you know, make some extra money doing this instead of, talking about things that are so far above people's head that they don't have time to scour, 100 different auction houses and find every different, auction out there. So that's kind of the path I'm coming from, is trying to make it replicable for other people.
I think that I would be careful. Like, if you're investing in stuff, in anything, like, the amount of work that I'm putting in should be your bare minimum of, like, I'm just gonna be completely honest with you, like, to seriously consider something an investment, other than maybe just throwing things into like large index funds. That's just my personal opinion. But to have a little bit of fun and to do something that's a low risk and could possibly make you money, like, I'm with you there, Alex. Like, and I'm not like hating on that. At the same time, it's like, it's not that hard to do what I do. Like, and it doesn't take, and when you use like bot tools and sniper stuff, and you, like, it's not that difficult.
I just remember back in the day,
like, what are your expectations though on some of these modern products? I think that's everything. I really do. Because I think all modern products are going to be at a higher price in 10 years. I really do. I believe in Pokemon. I don't think it's going anywhere. The thing is, I could probably buy these products near the same price in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I mean, literally, the ones that are just coming out, they're going to be reprinted usually for about the next 2 years, right? So why would I spend my money now when I could probably get it for near the same price in 3 or 4 years, when I'm only a year or two away from them actually moving?
Well, my rebuttal to that is, well, why, maybe I can buy those vintage slabs for the same price in 2 to 3 years. What's going to cause those to move as well?
It's true. I'm not saying vintage is investable. It's, everything is by card, by sealed product. Like, I don't think if you're going to buy a first edition Charizard, I wouldn't say it at 350,000 it's investable. But maybe in 9 years, and then Pokemon's going to come out with a virtual reality video game in 10 years. And we're in a whole new, like, if you see the sports card markets moving, like, that's when I would say vintage is investable. But in terms of just modern and sticking with modern, sealed product, I just feel like I can buy in the future, right? Like, if I pick something up at Target, that's for me. But in terms of investability, I'd much rather be 1 or 2 years away from gains I'd rather buy it at $110 in 4 years than $85 today. Kind of like I think we all would, if you could 100% say that's going to be possible, right? Well, yeah, true. That's what. But I believe that. I believe that.
Again, I think it goes back to like how I think about it. Percentage, like, what percentage do I feel like that's going to happen? Because no one can predict the future, so it's all guessing, right? But if I think that there's a chance that will happen, but there's also a chance that it will go up quickly, I might buy some, but not all of it, right? And then we could throw in like terms I don't love, like dollar cost averaging and all, or picking up, some as I go along, these types of things. That's very reasonable. I think with the vintage stuff, the pro vintage stuff, particularly the stuff where the pop reports are not growing anymore, and I'm studying that market extremely carefully, we're not seeing a lot of the slabs coming onto auction anymore, and we're not seeing them. And so that can mean one of two things. Either people aren't buying them, so there's a lack of interest, or it could mean that collectors are finally getting their hands on them and they're not interested in selling at these prices at all. And so they're not even being listed as much anymore, which could mean that the next time people start to want these things, particularly for some of the PSA 10s, they're going to start having to pay up again. And that's where you could see that move up. Whereas for not necessarily modern sealed, but because it's hard to compare sealed with singles because there's a lot of different variables. But with modern singles, particularly Sword and Shield, the pop reports are just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of growth. Whereas some of these older ones, they're more filled out, more in collectors' hands, et cetera. And then you also have to look at price point, right? Because it's yes, booster boxes may seem like a better investment because they go down over time and there are less and less of them, but it all depends on price point. If the booster box costs a huge amount and the number one chase card from that set is like way less, but it's extremely hard to pull, then that chase card is a better value in my opinion. It It isn't one or the other. So I'm going to let Squeaks.
Yeah.
What's up, man? What's up, not Squeaks?
Hey guys. Can you hear me? Are we good?
Yeah. Jump into this.
I'm just giddy. I love this debate. Wait, why is my camera going crazy? It's because my lights are off. Vintage versus modern is my absolute hands down most favorite topic in the whole hobby. Just to watch. I love, dude. I'm literally like, I'm just like watching chat, like react to everything that's being said, dude. It's so fun. Oh man. I'm just here to have a good time. So you guys just keep spinning. And if you want any additional commentary, I'll provide it. But yeah.
I want to bring up something is that kind of the percent game you were talking about. See, the thing is why I talk about kind of there needs to be a time frame for a lot of your investments, because it's kind of the reason a lot of the older stuff kind of hits those ceilings and doesn't move slowly over the time, is because a lot of the movement is going to be within those first 5 years. So the percent gain in the first 5 years is not going to be the same as the next 5. So to say it's going to move X amount of percent per year, it's really impossible to know that, because the first 5 years, it could move 100 or 200%, but then the next 5, it might move 20. And so, I think that's something that needs to be looked at when you're looking at anything modern and looking at anything, buying anything older, is the older items may have already been through that kind of exponential growth. And now they're not going to have as good of growth in the future. So to buy something at 1,000 in 5 years, it may only be 12, 1,300. Where to buy something at 90 in those 5 years of its beginning of its life cycle, it could get to $200-300. So it's a lot better, percent gain you're going to see in those first 5 years than the next.
I think it's particularly true when Pokemon is pricing these things too low and there's not enough supply immediately. So when a product if you can get a product, UPC is a great example, but a lot of these booster boxes are good examples. Like if you can get these more popular ones right out of the gate at like $90 or an Elite Trainer box for 50 or 30 or whatever, and it's immediately already selling for quite a bit more and it's already trending up, then that's great. Then you're in a great situation. And basically what's happening is that you're sort of getting in below market. Like you're getting in below secondary market because you're able to buy it directly from Walmart or a large distributor trying to sell a lot of the product, right away. Whereas the sort of secondary market sellers are already asking more. But can it actually grow without that? And how much can it actually grow, and how much will a lot of these sets actually grow once all the distributor product is out there already on the secondary market and the reprints are done? I'm not sure. And I'm not sure. I guess I just go back to like, how can we possibly predict that? Because we're in a totally different time period right now. And so it's just sort of whatever you want to believe.
I'd like to get Nostalgic's opinion about my thinking. So my thinking with Pokemon is we've got 4 30-year-olds here. I saw Eva was in the chat. She's 21, right? I'd say we're at like, we are the upper, echelon of age, right? When you look at the average income of a 21-year-old versus a 31-year-old, it changes per the individual. Squeaks, I don't know how old you are, and I'm not even gonna guess.
Oh no, I was raising my. I want next after, like, when you're done.
Okay. I think I like Pokemon because of the demographics. I think that naturally over the next 10 years, Eva's probably going to be making more money than she's making now. I know I'm going to be making more money than I'm making now. But
I definitely will not be making more money.
I've already peaked. I'm planning on going down from here.
I just got my birthday Pikachu sub back. It's all down from here, baby.
I'm giving it to Squeaks. The only thing I'm curious about is, like, with Magic, you can see boxes where the expected value is way low, but people are paying way more to get that box, have 3 friends over and play games, and crack and play the game. With Pokemon, I see the future expected value of a lot of these boxes to remain low because of the amount of grading of chase cards. And I don't know what mechanism will bring modern Pokemon that sort of let's buy this box to have a fun Friday night where Magic gets a lot of their premiums. But go ahead.
Okay, I'm not gonna try to be a Debbie Downer here, but like,
God.
and I think that this argument specifically, and maybe just a lot of the debates that happen in this hobby, kind of root back to this fact of like, people love to write narratives. Like, dude, people in Pokemon are some of the like best authors I've ever seen. They will come up with like, they'll pick an idea out of the sky, and that's why everything's happening and why everything in the future is going to happen. And I feel like this started in 2016 when like the hobby went through, like, it had been pretty static in terms of what was happening over the last like 10, 15 years. And then just got turned on its head when a massive influx of people came in and everyone started crafting all these narratives about it's going up because of Pokemon Go and because of printing and everything like that. And now it's dying because bulk's dying or whatever's dying. And some of these things were like tangible and you could prove it with numbers. Other things were just like hypothesis based on how we feel or what we think or whatever. Sure. And like that's part of like investing as well. But that trend never stopped. And it only, like, I feel like it only got exacerbated in 2020. I mean, think of how many narratives were written, right? Like, Logan Paul came in, so everything's going to the moon. Logan Paul's second break, so everything's going into the moon even harder than it did before. And if all the YouTubers keep opening boxes, vintage is never, ever going to go down, even though Jungle and Fossil have, like, gotten cut in half since then. And now it's, because that didn't pan out, if all the YouTubers keep opening Modern will go to the moon forever. And, like, you can make any, like, I think Dan says a lot, you can make data say anything. You can make narratives say anything, like, at the end of the day, arguing vintage versus modern is arguing ideology. It is arguing like what people like and what they don't like, and the idea that like people are never gonna shift, and it's like a very black and white thing, and that like you either love vintage or you hate vintage, and vintage is the best, and modern is like. There's a reason that a Mike Trout card in baseball was able to outpace like 99.9999% of baseball cards that were ever printed, even though it is a modern card that was in like 2018, 2019. Wait, one sec, Jake. One sec. So here's what I would encourage. This is like where I want to just step in, because I'm like hearing what you guys are all debating, and like none of it is provable. Like all of it is just like conjecture on the future. Like, I would love to hear a vintage versus modern debate using empirical evidence. That's what I want to see. And I know that's not like just something we can just pull out of our ass right now. I'm like, we're going to start debating that because like, here's my fact sheet. I guess we could. Like, Dan could probably get in here right now and just do it. But like, that's why I love Dan's content so much, is he even if it's not like fully able to be done, he tries to do it. And I think that like, dude, Jake, your Discord spins on vintage versus modern harder than like any place I think I've ever seen other than E4, which like it feels like E4 light, like, because that used to be like the most prevalent debate topic ever, vintage versus modern. And like, you know where I don't see that argument happen a lot? Casual collecting communities where they just like collect a Pokemon because they like it and they don't care if the card was printed in 1999 or if the card was printed in 2019. Like, they just like Arcanine, so they collect Arcanines. Like, it's all good. It all can be successful. Some things in one era will outpace another era, and some things from that era will never be outpaced by things in this era. Like, I don't get the debate, but I think that there is a debate to be had, but I think it's less like vintage versus modern and more like what in vintage versus what in modern, instead of like the whole thing as a whole. Like, that's where I always struggle. Like, if we just want to like draw a line in the sand and say you can only invest in modern, you can only invest in vintage, and you have to pick which one, then let's like start pulling out the empirical evidence and getting some data and like just figure it out, right? And like the reality is trends can change, so that answer probably will not stay static or correct long term anyways, and can flip flop back and forth. Like, there have been eras where if you were a vintage investor, you were the Timmy because modern just was crushing it. And there have been other areas where if you were the modern investor and you held on in 2017 when bulk crashed and kept holding your Steam Siege boxes and your Fates Collide boxes and didn't go into vintage, even when things rode up, you were the Timmy, because if you would have just put that same amount of money and just accepted your losses and went back into vintage in the 2020 run up, you probably would have came ahead for most things. So like, I don't know, man. This is like, it's never going to be solved. Like, I hear you guys going around and like,
it won't be solved
here, but I think it's like too broad. Like, we're like, everything's being discussed way too broad. is like kind of my thing, right? Like, so that's where I'm at. Like, that's what I want to throw out there. Just run with it.
I think I was a Timmy for holding on to my Steam Siege and Evolutions, because I definitely held right on through. I held all the way, and I felt like a Timmy after I sold those boxes for a great profit. Yeah, it was awesome. But looking back on it, I was like, dude, it took a pandemic and it took trillions of dollars and stimulus checks and bad narratives and Logan Pauls of the world. I felt like a Timmy. So I'm looking back thinking, gosh, I don't want to do that again. I don't. And I didn't have any, there wasn't like, I was never worried because I wasn't as wrapped up in the whole Pokemon world. I just bought boxes and put them away. But looking back, I personally feel like a Timmy, even though I made out like a bandit. I'm just like sitting here, it's like, dude, the whole world was on lockdown for that to happen. You know, I just, that's my perspective.
But like, and maybe you were, right? Like, to some degree.
Oh, I was.
But like, so for example, we could say there, like, okay, maybe you fell in Timmy category, but like Modern did its thing and percentage wise did its thing. But like, if you took those Steam Siege boxes that you were in, which you probably should not have been, and put them in the super premium collections from Generation, which were already appreciating pre-pandemic, like those were already maturing, had no threat of a reprint, and were already performing. Same way with Generations Elite Trainer boxes, not Mythical Collections. Those are separate. Mythical Collections sucked and got saved by the pandemic. But the Elite Trainer boxes, totally separate. Same thing with Skyridge boxes, right? Jungle and Fossil boxes were not skyrocketing pre-pandemic. There are probably more of those than most Modern boxes out there, which is why I love that people are still like, oh, Modern's overprinted. Like, if people knew the warehouses of Jungle and Fossil unlimited boxes, they'd probably never buy another one. But like, the thing is, there were things from both eras. Like, Skyridge has like, just like, its graph has literally just like been what you would want an investment to be. Like, Skyridge has been extremely healthy, like, over the last 5 to 6 years. But there have been things in Modern that have done the same thing. But like, if you sat in the Steam Siege, or you sat in the wrong vintage things that didn't do as well, if you bought vintage theme decks, right? They did okay, but they didn't do great. And so like, that's where, to me, just debating Modern versus vintage, like, that's kind of my bigger point, is like debating just the whole thing.
No,
doesn't make nearly as much sense as like taking segments or sections.
Everything you just said is what I said in the first hour of today, even with examples and talking about.
I will say I didn't get here until people were here, so like that's where I missed your first thing. But
and I haven't been trying to debate Modern versus vintage, just talking Modern. And I think, I was saying in 2020, I was waiting for the 25th anniversary collector box, like the 2016 with the Pikachus and Sun and Moon. I was waiting for that, and I was going to buy that if they ever came out with one. And I think like a lot of those Japanese boxes, if you could get them at a good price, I think those would be investable if they were coming out at MSRP, because that Japanese limited stuff, if you have the whole, most Pokemon collectors want that kind of product, even though it is just in Japanese. I think if you could get those at a good price at MSRP, the problem is you can't get them at MSRP very easily.
But it's very unpredictable. Like, even like when Shiny GX came out, like I stocked up on a bit of Shiny GX, right? Because it's like, oh my god, this is like, that set was different. That set hit way different, even in Japanese when it first came out. And but I was happy when it went up $20, $30. That's what I was expecting to make, like, on that, right? So it's okay. So, but to going like, this whole idea, like the mindset that and the narratives that everyone has now is so different than it was 3-4 years ago. I cannot express this enough. And this is part of why, like, spending $2,000 on a card, that would have been like, you would have built a whole amazing collection with that. And you would have been anxious about spending like $30 or $50 or $100. And now people just like left and right on everything, because everything's investable and everything's going to snug, everything's going to go to the moon. Right. So it's but it's part of a growing hobby. It's part of an establishing maturing hobby. Some of the stuff is good. As far as like the narratives ideas, it's like, right, all investing is narratives and trying to understand narratives and trying to come up with a narrative, come up with a strategy based on your narrative. Some, as you said, some narratives are going to be more based on data and logic and reasonable, and some are going to be more just like, I just have this narrative and I can't even really give any reasons or any data or any experience behind it, but this is just like my narrative and it's my view, my opinion, right? And I think to say that all of those are equal and all of those are going to have the same success is basically just like investing doesn't exist, value investing, which is like not what I agree with at all. and I think based on the success I've had in my life in investing in a variety of areas, and my father has had for 30 years, and plenty of people all around the world have had in investing in businesses and seeing success over time. I mean, a lot of it is just about effort and putting time in, and like you will succeed if you just like buy and you hold and you have patience and you save, like saving, not spending a lot of money, just like investing in something decent. Like there is a lot of exaggeration of like how much intelligence and effort can help you like outperform versus just like throwing your money in just like an index fund without all the narratives. Or if you want to look at Pokemon, if you just bought a little of everything and just held it, how you would have done versus someone who was like super active, right, and had all these narratives. But at the same time, like the narratives are helpful, they're valuable to an extent, and they're interesting. And that's also the point, right? Of like, well, we like talking about the narratives, we like debating our different narratives and ideas, and but I do
and I'm not trying to discourage that, and I do want to clarify.
Let me say one more thing.
Okay, yeah.
What I will say is, here's where it bothers me, is when their narratives get in the way of like how you treat another human being. And I know I'm about to go moral and some people hate that, but like, it's like, no one should be that confident, like, because there's so many different narratives and there's so many reasonable narratives. And to what you just said, that's what I agree with, is that like, a bunch of different people can present a lot of reasonable narratives. And one thing that has happened in the Pokemon hobby is like, oh, an expert has this narrative, so we must all agree with said narrative. And that's the only thing that could possibly be true. And, the vast majority of people don't feel that way, but you will run into people in chats or other places who are like, well, this person said this, so it must, and it's like, dealing with that's annoying. But, but outside of that, I think, it's nice, and debate helps, and we all refine and shift our narratives, or, at the end of the day, it's all supply and demand. And so what you're trying to do is figure out, is answer that question as much as possible. What's the demand going to be like in the future for this? What's the supply going to be like? The scarcity of this item. And then you can come up with lots of different scenarios, and you can talk global, macroeconomic trends all the way down to like your sort of like, single data points of like very specific sales that you're looking at. And I think it's all valuable to a certain extent, but if you're just picking one data point, just as you said, or Dan said, or everyone says, right, I could take two data points and make a whole narrative that's a bunch of BS about how modern's so much better than vintage, or vintage is so much better than modern, just based on like one modern card versus one vintage card, or one vintage box versus one modern box. And it's silly. But none of us, I think, are doing that. So
sure, yeah. And
I like what you said.
I do want to clarify that, like, me saying all of that was more commentary towards chat, or just people that seem to every single day find themselves in this argument. Like, dude, there are some people that if they dedicated as much time to just like working in the hobby for like the investing or research or whatever as they did just arguing vintage versus modern, they would be like top 1%ers, like, without a doubt. I have no doubt in my mind. But so let's actually take one. I want to take one that like is a hot debated topic. That, I'm sorry, nostalgia, I don't actually know your first name.
Oh, Alex.
Okay, nice to meet you. I've never met you.
By the way, man, honored to be on video with you, man. I loved watching you and Radar's old podcast, and been watching you for a long time. Dude,
thanks. By the way, real quick, it's Radar's birthday. Happy birthday, Radar.
Yeah. Well, happy birthday, Radar.
Yeah. Shoot. So
on Friday too. Lucky.
But Alex, you had a video where you talked about ultra premium collections, and that you thought they were a good investment. And that video has been, I would say, slightly controversial But it's interesting because like I highly agree with you. In fact, I never even sold any of mine. Like from the day they released, I saw the product, I saw what it was released in, the era it was released in, and I said there is no shot I'm listing any of those. Now, I'm gonna keep it a $150 with you. I didn't watch the whole video. I watched like 6 minutes of it, and it was on 2x speed, and I was working. So like, but I got the moral of it, right? Like I knew what you were going for there, and I read through some of the comments. I've seen some of the commentary sideways and ever, but I don't disagree with you actually, and I don't necessarily agree for the same reasons, but I don't disagree on the product. But I think a lot of people do, and so I want to discuss ultra premium collections. Not to shill them, because I already think they're going to the moon. There's my story. I own like 30 of them, not like 100 like TCA, but I have been a fan of that product since day one. And if you guys want my reasoning as to why, like my data points as to why, it's that no ultra premium collection or anything like in that realm. They used to call them super premium collections or whatever. But it started back with like the Mew Mewtwo one. They did a Dragon's Majesty one. Shining Legends had the Ho-Oh box one. And then eventually they had a European version because they couldn't do the figure. So they did like a flat one with a jumbo. And then somehow all the extra ones landed over here on Amazon, which tanked the price, but then they rebounded. No ultra premium collection has ever not matured. They've also, other than the Shining Legends one, none of them ever went through a second print wave. And the second print wave of the Shining Legends one was not identical to the first. So if you had the big figure box, you were way ahead. Oh, and I forgot the Hidden Fates ones. You had the Hidden Fates, there were the Metagross and the Zoroark one with the ball, and then you had the big Rayquaza statue one, which was actually in the toilet for a while, but now has obviously done very nicely. So history tells us, and what I based it on was every single one of these ever has performed. And by all metrics, in terms of like comparing every variable with these, Dragon's Majesty should have been the one that didn't. None of the cards were worth anything. Nobody cared about that era. It only had one ultra rare worth anything, and yet still somehow found a way to not only mature and demand a premium, but it wasn't attributed to COVID. And so then you take the ultra premium collection that was an anniversary set. I mean, they were maturing before COVID had began. Some of it, a good chunk of its growth came. But my point is the ultra premium collection was unique. The packs inside had Chase. It also had additional packs that were not the celebration set that had Chase. They had metal cards. It's the first time they ever did it, and it's arguably two of the most popular cards they ever did of all time. It had good display. So, like, in terms of comparing variables just across all of these, if history told me all the other ones did this, I'm not saying that this one couldn't be an outlier, an exception for other reasons, and fail. But based on what history is telling me, which is all I have to use to make this assessment and where I think the hobby's going, this thing should just be an absolute slam dunk home run, no brainer. Like, to me, that was in my opinion, was the most no brainer product in terms of like, should I hold it or should I not, of any product that has been released probably since I got in the hobby in 2010. And so like, that's what I use to make that assessment. And so when I hear people debate it now, I want to hear a counter argument to that. That's like, not just I hate modern, and so ultra premium collections suck and they're not going to go up. Like I want to debate this product because I think it's good.
Well, you're not going to get any debate from me, so I'm guessing.
Yeah, sure. But does anyone else have, like, even in somebody in chat, right? Like, I just like want to discuss the idea of like the negativity towards like that. Like in my mind, if ultra premium collections couldn't appreciate in value or don't appreciate in value, it would only be because of one of two things. Either so many people did it that's what prevented it from happening, or nothing from this era appreciated in value. Like those were like the two that I kind of like came to the conclusion of, if it doesn't happen, it's probably because of one of those two things. And I thought the price point barrier of the ultra premium collection, the amount of them that was released and the difficulty of getting them initially kind of hedged against that first one. At which point, if I'm going to make a play in modern anyways and decide that is something I want to do, why wouldn't I take the thing that I feel like if this can't do it, nothing can? Like that was kind of my thought process. So, but anyways, go, Jake. I feel like you got something.
No, I mean, I thought the UPC was going to do amazing as soon as I heard it had those those gold cards. And when I was talking to you and a bunch of other friends who were not getting a lot of the product, like I was like, oh my God, like there are not going to be many of these out there. And they have these, they're sort of the only fairly rare standout-ish type, product, because the set, even the harder to pull cards in the set, just given how much is probably printed, is going to be pretty easy to get. I think UPC was an obvious slam dunk. I mean, the only issue now is price point. Is it worth it still at the price? I mean, that's where it comes down to at the end of the day. It's like back then, I definitely wouldn't have had any qualm, and I would have had the exact same logic as you. If anything appreciates out of this is probably going to appreciate the most. And I think it's already artificially low, because I think that because they're not printing enough of this, I think it's going to be the one that moves up the quickest, or that has the most potential upside immediately, unless they reprinted it a bunch, which you don't know for sure. And again, I don't love they haven't reprinted this in the past, so they're not going to reprint it in the future. They'll do whatever they do, but I'll throw like a 5 to 10%, in my sort of probability with that. Like that's how much that's worth to me.
Sure. That's where I chalk it up as like, could it be the exception? Yes. Yeah. But I will let history dig. Well, could it be the roaring skies of booster boxes?
ETBs, because they used to never reprint ETBs and only reprinted booster boxes, and then they shifted it. The booster boxes went up and the ETBs got, crashed. So it's whatever, but it's yeah. And so at the price point today, I have no clue if you should buy it or not. And how I would try to see if I should buy it or not, if you want to momentum invest on it, is by looking to see how much is coming off eBay and TCG Player every day. You want to follow the price trajectory. You want to see how many people are relisting. You want to see the speed at which it's selling, and you can momentum invest into it if you'd like, if you feel like it's going up, or, that's part of what's so easy about this, is all the data's out there. You just go and track it. Now, where's it going to be in 5 to 10, 15 years? Like, for me, it's too high of a price point for me to put that much money in something like that, because I can just be a lot more active with that and do a lot of different things. But that could go to $1,000 in a year. Why not? I just don't know how many are out there. I don't know how much money it's going to take to move that price point. That may be absolutely ridiculous and may have no chance, because there's just not going to be enough demand and there's too much of the supply out there. Or it could do great. Like how would any of us here have any idea? That's kind of my take. And beyond just that, I know how much all of my distributor friends got, basically. And I can some estimate, or I can compare that to other products, and have some estimate of maybe how much, there is of that relative to something else, and then compare that price point compared to that. They're very, very expensive right now. And so it's you're paying a lot for a great product, is what I would say. It's probably the best modern product. So
yeah, I think for anyone who's still kicking around getting one, I mean, I think if you want one for your collection, probably going to be the best price you're going to see, without anything crazy happening. As an investment, yeah, I mean, for $375, I mean, what else is there that you could buy and do well in that amount of time? I agree. I mean, it's such a high price point now where it's like, yeah, it's probably not coming down, but what's going to move better than it? Probably a lot of things. But I mean, I just want to talk about the whole vintage modern thing real quick, because I didn't get a chance to. I think because I came onto YouTube and I had that mindset, I got attacked and kind of put in the limelight for a lot of that stuff. I want to make it clear that, I did have nothing but vintage for the first 6 years I was back in Pokemon. And so I'm not someone that just came back and, has no idea what they're doing, had never collected vintage and just some modern shill or anything like that. My views are based off, the past 7 years I've been back in this. And so, it's not like I hate vintage. I just like to play that devil's advocate, because I feel like, I don't know the percentage, but it seems like 90% of the people in the Pokemon investing type YouTube space are all about vintage. And so I just thought there needed to be someone out there that was a little to the other side, to kind of show the other side, because it just seems that way to me, that, it's modern isn't really getting its fair share. It's just seen as oh, that's what all the pump and dump guys are doing. That's what all the, hype YouTubers are opening. That's what everyone's hyping up. It's kind of like the flavor of the day. And so that's all. I just want to throw it out there. Like, I'm not against anyone liking and loving vintage and collecting vintage and anything like that. So I just don't want my name to keep being associated with that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, you know, for me, I have a different view than you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't really care that you have a different view than me. I mean, to me, I just don't want to like exhaust myself with this. Like Squeaks was saying, it is a very convoluted debate, right? And it can be exhausting. Like, we have talked more about this debate, right, than cards, for example, or what, you know, how we think we're doing. And most people enjoy the money side of anything. It gets there must be something that fires in our brains. And, you know, gosh, it's tough. I don't want to bum anybody out either, or I don't want to fight with anybody. I'd rather just let them be. Now, if I'm going to be on a live, I will say how I feel, and I've said that already. But yeah, it's been like since 2020. It's been like 2 years, and it's an exhaustive deal, and I wonder why it is. I wonder.
Well, I think the fact that there even is that conversation should show that there's a big amount of popularity and a lot of people that are believing in modern. So I think at very least we can end the debate kind of fully by saying there's going to be a place for both in the future. And anyone saying that either one is not going to be a thing is kind of wrong. Like, to say that all the modern is not going to be worth anything, it's all overprinted, there's way too much, you know, it's just all going to go, you know, flatline and never do anything, I think is the same as someone saying, you know, no one's going to care about vintage in the future. So I just think there's going to be a place for both. And that's really the only thing I'm ever trying to get through in any debate like this, is that, you know, yeah, I understand vintage is great. I get we grew up with it. I understand the rarity, the scarcity of the grades, but let's not forget about modern. It's going to have its place too, with all the new collectors, the young kids, and everyone who got back in during Pokemon Go and grew and kind of grew with the hobby through modern, is all I'm saying.
So I saw one video where I felt like you were a lot more aggressive than that, Alex.
that was probably after that Pokemon Knowledge was on your channel and called me out for the Patreon and the paywall. It was crazy.
All four of us get and understand being a YouTuber, and then feeling attacked, and then making a video in response to that, and then like viewing it a few days later and being like, sure, like I agree with what I said, but like I'm not nearly as hot now, and probably didn't need to be that hot, you know, that type of thing. Like every single YouTuber can relate to that.
Yes.
But I think that
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done that. Whenever name one time.
Squeaks, I've got the hot for you. I'm like, hey, watch Squeaks. And Squeaks is over here just chilling.
I just feel like I'm so new to YouTube, and I feel like I've like somehow pissed so many people off so quickly. And I'm not that guy at all.
I'm not mad.
Not that guy.
Yeah,
I feel like
I am not mad.
You're my target, nostalgia. You're my target for some. There was some stupid stuff. You got to admit, there was some stupid stuff over the last couple of years. And I watched everybody. You know, I wasn't watching any single person. There was a lot of obnoxious things that cost a lot of people money. And when you cost yourself, when a hobby costs you money in a way that you're not expecting, you leave that hobby, especially if you're new to it. I was so upset with the way so many people handled the boom, because I didn't think it was the best way. It's inevitable. What happened was inevitable, but I didn't think I just had so much pent up frustration with the leadership in the hobby that now that a lot of them are gone and you jump in and you're very similar in terms of the topic, not what you're saying. I personally, and I'm probably talking for other people that it sounds like you've been attacked. I don't think I've commented on your video other than one time, but I didn't attack you. That just explaining, I had a bunch of pent up frustration with leadership, and I view anyone talking to people through YouTube as leadership, no matter the credentials. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think the problem is I missed a lot of that. So like I said, when the boom happened, I didn't hit like the tops, but I sold like 95% of my collection into the boom. And I walked away for like a year. And I was just like, okay, this is going to be bad. I don't want to be around for it. And so when I came back and started watching content again and started collecting and investing again, I just looked around and said, man, there's tons of investing channels, but it's all kind of more longer form or podcasts or things like that. And I was like, there's just not any of that short form content, kind of get to the point, tell people what they need to know. And a lot of people are telling me there was a ton of that. And so I think I missed a lot of those channels because I wasn't around I stepped away for a good year or more just because I sold everything out and I was just kind of walking away from it, washing my hands because I knew how bad this was going to be after the whole Logan Paul thing. Some things actually didn't turn out as bad as I thought, but I can't believe I'm back in doing all this again. But I think maybe I missed a lot of that. And so like, I know I heard, I'm not going to mention any names, but people mentioned it or did videos on it. And I get there was that out there, and I'm not trying to be that guy or pump things or shill things or anything like that.
I mean, when you say or imply that modern Pokemon sealed product investing is better than the S&P 500 or index fund, you're just going to get a lot of people who are like, whoa, that's radical. You know what I mean?
Just by numbers, it has been. I'm not saying it will be in the future, but in the past 7 years.
In the past 2 years, yeah. But then before it was terrible. Right. But what if you had invested in a million other pop culture collectibles that didn't go up, right? Or that died? Like, why Pokemon?
I mean, I'm not an expert in other collectibles. I'm not an expert in Pokemon. I've been around and I've seen, small ups and downs. We've seen the large ups and downs. And now this year, I mean, literally 2022, you could still be buying things and making gains on them to this day. I just did a video showing that. I mean, it's still happening even after the boom.
I know you're tied to that. And like, you're just like, it's better because the numbers have showed it's better. And I'm very much, you're taking a tiny snapshot and you're making this big conclusion that I think is not good for people to hear. It's just you and I can just agree to disagree. And like, I hope we're friends at this point, or friendly, and we can sort of agree to disagree on that. And other people can like take that message as like whatever on both sides. Cause I've gotten a lot of hate too from people who watch your channel who have been just like, Jake doesn't understand data and he doesn't follow the numbers. He doesn't get it, So it's like the hate works both ways and people can be nasty on both sides. And I've defended you to people like who have said nasty things to me. And I've been like, no, like he's not saying, like that, it's not that much. Right. And, and to say that I'm a vintage channel, or I think vintage investing is the way to go, is a complete mischaracterization, right, of myself. And I think what my channel is. So when you say most of the content out there is vintage or something like that, like, I don't know who you're talking about, because I don't think TCA, myself, Squeaks, SM Pratt, like any of us are just like vintage. Pokey Knowledge, I would say, is vintage. And he just talks about, I just love vintage. And there might be some other channels you're thinking of, but it gets a little straw man-y to me of like, who are you fighting against? Like who are these boogeymen out there that don't want modern channels to exist? Because I don't feel that way, but there might be more. It's more people in your chat or people who are just being like, I definitely believe that there's douchebags out there, frankly, who are just like, being rude and like vintage is the only thing that matters. And like, make those types of comments, but like, you've never heard any of us say that, particularly in the last year and a half or 2 years, I don't think. I mean, I
guess it is more. It's just a few channels. It's also every chat. I feel like if I come to a channel like yours or Pokemon Knowledge or those types of channels, if I say one thing about modern, I immediately have 20 or more comments back on just blasting me on how wrong it is and how vintage is like the king of it's overwhelming. I'm just like, if it's overwhelming, I guess I'll just stay out of those communities and those channels. I'll just kind of stay over here in my own lane. But I think I'm still want to get this message out. And I don't know, I guess it's not that you or anyone's against modern. I just feel like 95% of your content is usually geared towards vintage. I mean, just an average stream. But an average stream, if I tune into you, I mean, you're talking about these high end, cards from EX era or Diamond and Pearl or vintage, or I mean, it is what it is.
Alex, I talk so much about lower end stuff and all these $10, $40, $50 cards I'm buying. Like you characterize me as some like ultra rich, only talk about really expensive stuff. And it's not true.
A little true.
How, I have stacks and stacks of $15, $20 cards around me. These are all under $20, just the nearest stack, every single one of them.
So do you think like on your regular, most of your videos, do you think the average person can duplicate what you do?
Most of the stuff I talk about, it's much cheaper than what you're talking about.
So you believe the average person can duplicate exactly what you do?
Exactly what I do? No, probably not. Like exactly. No, I mean, I have 7 years of 4 hours a day of experience. I probably know the numbers and the pop reports and the prices better than, or as well as anyone, right? Because I've lived it every single day and I'm immersed in the numbers. So no, but like.
Well, who's out there for those people then?
Who's out there for those people? I mean, Rudy.
They don't have 7 years of
PokeRev.
They're looking for things.
PokeRev and everybody that's opening product. I mean, Squeaks, you go.
I was laughing that PokeRev was the one you mentioned. Like, yeah, that's funny.
Well, I mean,
nothing against him. It's just like I don't even think he does financial content. Like, I think that's like
exactly
what you're referring to is like who does the financial content. But like,
I might be, but like the majority of content to me is 5 modern booster boxes, 5 best modern cards, slabs. It was for years. Well, and so that's my opinion on what most of the content was. So
yeah, and I think, okay, I'm gonna say this as someone that's trying to like objectively view this from the outside, right? And take everything you guys both just said as like 100% fact. So like Alex, you just said that like you didn't really see a lot of the Pokemon content because you had like sold out, left, now you're back, right? And like missed a certain wave. So maybe you haven't seen as much of Jake's more recent content, where I would argue that he's not only discussed Modern more, but maybe even been bullish on Modern to some degree, right? But I will also say, Jake, when I first discovered your channel, I primarily pegged you as someone interested in Vintage, not just because you were bullish on Vintage, but because you were either extremely bearish on Modern or just almost blurred the line of not liking Modern. And like all the way back to like we have the quote in our Discord of like you saying Mothman's better than anything in Modern, like that you would bet on Mothman more than any.
It was much
okay,
better.
but you've bought Modern cards since. So how many Mothman have you bought?
But this is not about what I like. I have them, by the way, and whatever.
Like I'm not trying to pay, like I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, I think things can be misconstrued, like that. I don't think you were necessarily intending to like have a certain angle. That's just maybe how it came off at certain points in time. And if you haven't seen the full spectrum of content, then you've like.
Here's what I said the entire time, right? Don't buy anything. I told everyone for 10 months, 12 months to buy that I was buying nothing except a couple of trophy cards and to not buy anything in the entire hobby. And then I was selling 70% of everything, including all my vintage. And that I love Modern, but literally nothing in Modern is investable, where there are a couple. I was right during that period, right? Now, I was wrong for 3 months. 3 months. And then I was right the rest of the way, But again, it's not so much about the specific numbers. Like I stand behind, I don't think it was investable. It happened to work out, but I think, and listen, people who bought at that period and then sold right at that high period, I was probably 2 months early or something, in terms of when I started making I'm concerned and worried content. But I never told anyone that you should sell right now. I told people my personal beliefs and that you can't time these things.
And I'm not questioning that. I just want to clarify. Like I don't even think that I have already been under the impression of what you're giving. Like what I'm saying is, if all the narrative you ever heard is you saying Modern is not investable right now, even if you still stand by that and believe that, and I don't even inherently disagree with you, and then they never got the other take, which is now my mind has changed and Modern has went through a lot of variable changes and is investable, they may just see you as like either extreme bearish Modern or like I don't like Modern. And like so what I'm trying to more paint the narrative of like without this gap in content of like understanding like how people's views not only change or just progress as the market changes, you may have a perspective of someone that may not be accurate. That's what I'm trying to show.
But like, seem to have an accurate perspective of Alex, and Alex seems to have an inaccurate perspective of me, which is what we're talking about here, from my perspective.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm trying to like show reasoning as to why that perspective may be inaccurate.
Oh, I get it, and I have lots of hours and hours of content, and people will just watch a little bit or peg me a certain way or whatever. You know, I'm a very conscious person. I think that it's very dangerous to be thinking about any of this stuff very, very seriously as investment. I think the majority of it should just be fun and should be enjoyed. And any of the market talk is sort of like secondary. And even someone who's as deep and, you know, crazy into it, like the fact that I made so much money is largely luck. And I just happened to be in Pokemon, and I happened to pick Pokemon, and I could have picked other things like, you know, or any collectibles. Okay. And then just the amount of effort and time, like just insane amounts. Like I'm the only person who goes through 11,000, you know, auctions in the PWCC auction. I'm probably the only person in the world, which is why I bought like 500 things below market when nobody else even looked through it. Right. Like I think I'm the only one doing that potentially, you know, or one of the only people. And it's just, I think where I get frustrated is when I'm being like characterized as like, this is all you think, or this is what you think, when in reality, like I've said plenty of like nuanced things during this discussion, during every discussion I feel like I'm part of, that shows a broader view here. But a year and a half ago, when I did say that I would not invest in anything in modern. That was my opinion at that point.
That's when I was watching you the most. And, you know, when you were saying you would never touch an Evolutions box or Burning Shadows box, like all those boxes that I made a lot of money on, you were saying no one should buy those.
I actually bought some at the $100 to $300. And when Z&G Importing came out with this video, I said, I feel the exact same way, because all the product was moving up. But this was once it already hit $300-400. That's when I started really coming against it. And my focus was mainly against the singles. Okay. Now the Evolutions booster box also. Okay. And that was the Evolutions boost in particular, something I've always been anti, because I don't get reprints, and that set was just so disliked, and then shifted and switched. But like, it's so frustrating because like it's yes. At $300 to $400, if you bought those booster boxes, the Evolutions, it's like, because I made one wrong call by a few months, that it went from $300 to $400 to $1,000, then back down to $700. But like my 30 or 40 or 50 other exactly right calls and exactly right timing, when everyone was saying the opposite of me or yelling at me, it's just it's very irritating. And then being pigeonholed, when the whole time I was saying, because people would come on my channel and say, should I sell now? And I said, it could double again. There's at least 50 times, you can go back on my channel right now, guys, that I said it could go to 1,000. It could go to 1,000. This is when it was at $300 to $400, because I understand how momentum markets work, but I still don't believe in that market. I don't believe in it today. I don't believe in that product today.
I don't either. I think it could come down to $300-400.
And it's momentum.
Go ahead.
No, you know, and because I can't time things, and I can't, you know, predict exactly when things are going to move or this or that. But my frustration is when you have PokeNab saying it's going to go up, you know, but then he doesn't come out and say, I'm shocked that it went up to $300 to $400. Like every single person was stunned, even people who were saying positive things, then says it's going to go to 1,000, and then says it's going to go to 2,000. That is the time period that I'm in, guys. And that's why I'm trying to talk rationality, and where this is just throwing out random new numbers higher and higher and higher, and just pushing things up and telling people to buy endlessly. When in reality, it was very risky. People who held it at $300 to $400, hoping it would go to like 600, 1,000, I think is risky. It worked out. It's the same thing with so many things, like anything with momentum investing. It's all just gambling and speculation.
Well, that's why that's that frustration that I was talking about, because you had the, you know, fundamentals. Shout out to Alex Minnow out there, but the fundamentals of Evolution's booster boxes have dwindled down to the PSA 10 Charizard that you can't get, right? Because everything else is just to the moon in pop reports. And so I'm watching I'm watching Jake, who's giving good advice on a lot of vintage, not do as well in popularity as a Pokenave who's saying, you know, you had SM Pratt saying, it's not in a bubble yet. Call me when it goes to 1,000. And then it does go to 1,000. You've got Pokenave, who is riding this Evolution's massive wave of viewership because of Evolutions. And instead of just chilling out, he posts his 20 Evolutions booster boxes up on his own website for $13.40, which is $350 more than market price, and says, I think it could go to 2,000. To this day, I don't know if he was trying to pump his own product up and use people. I doubt that. Maybe he actually thought it could go to 2,000.
And I don't want to hate on him. And he's someone who had me on his channel and I'm fairly friendly with, and don't think it's
totally,
a bad.
Totally fine. But this is why I was upset.
Yeah,
because I'm looking at this from afar. I sold my Evolutions booster boxes when they jumped up to 500. I posted them at 425 to undercut the market because I'm like, there's no way this is going to last. So yeah, I 4x'd my money or whatever over a period of 4 years. Great, sure. But I'm watching, you know, that's that leadership that I was talking about that I was upset with, because I'm watching the leadership in the hobby cannibalize the hobby for views, for whatever reason. The reason doesn't matter to me. There was too much cannibalization at the expense of collectors, or new collectors especially, that don't know very much. That's where all of my frustration came from. And then when Nostalgianomics, not saying that you're saying anything the same or doing the same things, just the very similar topics, modern, investability. Yeah, I can see where a lot of the animosity is coming from. And I don't think you should be getting that. I think people should let you just stick to your own lane and do what you enjoy. You know, I think you got to be careful because you're in front of people, and whether you like it or not, your words are getting into people's minds, and you know, take that responsibility for what it is. But I don't think you should be getting any hate or anything. This should all be fun. This is a hobby. Yeah.
Let me say something to that real quick, just because, you know, things got a little hot right there. Like, to Jake's point, yeah, I hope we're all friends here, and like I think that's why we can debate this. I mean, I think we all feel friendly and we feel comfortable enough to just debate. But no, at the end of the day, we're just talking about a hobby we love, and we have opinions, so we talk strongly about them. But in no way am I mad at anyone or like upset or not like anyone. I mean, and honestly, I'm so happy that Jake had me on, because now, like, just like everything he said, now I know that he's a lot more into modern than I realized. And he, you know, enjoys modern and believes in it a lot more than I thought. And so this was a huge help for me, at least. Now I know that there are people that, even though they have a lot of vintage, or, you know, are into vintage, buy a lot of vintage, they still have a good, you know, I guess, heart for modern. So yeah, I mean, I think there's just misconceptions, you know, across, you know, what you see, or, you know, the small glimpses of what you see if people are here. And so, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I hope everyone knows that I'm not upset with anyone, especially you, Jake, or anyone on here.
Yeah, I mean, I think my issues came down generally to content that just talks about everything is positive and everything is always going up and always going to go up. I think it's a general grift. And you see it everywhere, like in Bitcoin and stocks and everything. And now you can also just get into like everything's forever bad and it's bearish, and you're sort of your tinfoil hat, conspiracy theory, doom and gloom. Like, these are the two extremes of the two sides that I see on the internet. You know, it's sort of like there are people who are just like, every company's bad, every person who makes money is bad, and this is all should be worthless and pointless. And then on the other side, you have like, oh, like someone says like, I just put money in this, like, because I can't see how it'll go down. And then the creator responds to them like, definitely, man, like 100%, I agree with you. You know, And it's just like this ridiculous, like echo. It's stupid. Like it's this ridiculous echo chamber, right? Of like, of not talking about like risk. And again, if it's just for fun, I'm with you. This is where I go back to Alex. Like, but you're saying it's better than the S&P 500. This is where you can't have it both. Like, if it's both better than the S&P 500, but we should, and that's where I get into that sort of thing. If someone says like, hey, this is all just for fun, and I don't think you should ever put like any real money that you could actually lose in this, and whatever. And I mean, Rudy recently made a video talking about some, I forget what it was titled. And by the way, I just want to say this, like, Alex, like your videos are like way above so much stuff that we had to deal with like a year and a half ago. Like, so, I don't put you in the same category as like any of these content creators before. And my part of the irritation and frustration in this conversation, this stuff isn't geared towards you largely. I mean, the only thing that irritates me is the S&P 500 and that one video you made. That's like literally the only issues I have with your entire.
It irritated a lot of people. You're not alone.
You're entitled to it. You're entitled to say it, but it's going to bother me because I don't agree. And I don't.
Well, another thing I'm doing on my channel is every quarter I'm going to go back and anything I've talked about in my videos that I said was a good idea. I'm going to constantly show how those items are performing every single quarter, and so it keeps me accountable for anything I've said. So that way, like you said, even if there are downturns, if there are things going bad, people are going to see it. They're going to see I was wrong. But I think it's good to show, because when things do perform well, it is good to show, because anyone saying that, 95% of Pokemon stuff is just, going to be a net negative, and, you can't really make money at this. It's not investable, all these things. It's just not the experience I've had, in the whole time I've been in, even before Logan Paul, even in like 2015 to 2017 time. I mean, there were 150% gains on some of those items. So there was movement before the look. What's that?
What items?
I mean, like when I got back in, a base set booster box was 800, and then, it was like 2,000 or more. Same with a lot of those sealed products. They went up literally over 100% within a year that I got back into the hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the truth at the end of the day. Like it comes from a place of like, when I look at the stock market right now, and when I look at the Pokemon market, do I think that the Pokemon market is going to do better than the stock market over the next 5 to 10 years? There's a decent chance it will. Let's be completely honest. Okay. With could both do badly? Absolutely. But there's a decent chance that it will. I just don't like any pop culture collectible being compared in the long run to the stock market and to investing in large multinational, but it really has more to do with your time horizon, when you're specifically buying in. And I just feel like it's beyond like, I don't know where you're getting it from. Like I've been doing this for 7 years. Like I've read books from guys doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. And they talk all the time about how like 9 out of 10 of these pop culture collectibles just completely fail. And then you have like these rare occasional ones that work. And maybe Pokemon's at a point where it's too big to fail now, or we've made it through, or it's a more established marketplace, as these guys talk about. But it just makes me anxious. And
we're going to have to bail out Pokemon.
It's a different age. It's a different age now. With social media, the internet, with having these completely engrossed communities 100% of the time, all day long, it's not like collectibles that were before the internet age. It's completely different, because those communities had to stay alive locally, local card shops, maybe when the internet first came on, these chat rooms. Nowadays, when people are fully engrossed in a hobby day in and day out all day, it's a lot harder for a hobby to die now.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally made all those arguments when I brought Sean on the channel and, Reserved Investments, talking about how I think he underestimates social media and the impacts of these types of communities around these. But the counter argument is that, but new ones could just be created around new things so quickly. Like, why does it stay around Pokemon instead of something new? Like, why can't it continue to shift on like the next new collectible? And now that there's so many different options, and it's so easy to get anything, anyone could start anything. I don't know. But it's a much broader debate, and I do think that I've been overly sensitive and reactive to you a little bit at times, and your content, but I don't like being strawmanned. Like I don't like when someone tells me what my argument is when that's not what I'm saying. It's definitely a pet peeve. And but listen, if you're like I've been truthful the whole time. Like I've platformed you. I want you to succeed, and I could definitely be wrong about a lot of things, and about and maybe I'm not bullish enough. Maybe I'm too a perpetual bear on this stuff. But I don't know. Squeaks and Swami and other people in the chat. Do you think? What do you make of all of that?
Swami, do you want to go first or me? Okay.
First, man.
Yeah, first I gotta say, chat is wild, dude. You guys are funny right now. Dang. It's so serious in here and so funny out there, and Swami and I are just like dodging bullets on both sides and trying not to laugh so they don't think we're laughing at what they're saying. Yeah, you guys are rough. So let's go into this, because I have a URL open because I couldn't find my sticky note tab, and I'm literally taking notes. So I have like the longest URL in Google Chrome right now of things I've been thinking about that I didn't want to lose train of thought of. So the first one is Nostalgianomics. I gotta tell you, so I looked through your channel. I feel like I have like a pretty decent grasp on what it takes to blow up on YouTube, and certain things like I am personally willing to do and other things I'm not willing to do, and we don't have to get into all that. But what I will say is your growth in a short period of time is actually like on a trajectory to become like a relatively big channel. And I think the reason is you drive a lot of really, like, every video you make drives engagement. And what a lot of YouTubers fail to do is drive engagement from the people that don't like them. And the only time they generally do is if it's like a polarized topic or an emotional topic. And the reason you experience the growth you do is because you, from my impression, I haven't known you that long and I haven't watched a lot, but like, I gather that when you have a belief and you say it, and you are not scared to say your belief, and it is what it is. But generally, like, it's one of those that like people are going to feel really strongly for you or really strongly against you. And there's not going to be a lot of in between. And it may not be as much of like, you fully believe that 100%. It's just, I believe it 80%. I just don't think it's worth the time to discuss the 20% of like, oh, this could fail. This is just my experience. Give all the disclaimers, whatever. But that is why then I think Jake maybe has the reaction that he does, or people have the reaction that they do, right? So essentially what he is saying, or Swami is saying, I think, is kind of that when you say those things and you're that like bullish, or that is your experience, and so you're giving it and you're not giving some of those disclaimers or some of those downsides or things like that, that is your prerogative, and it's probably actually helped your content growth. But in the long run, does it pose a danger to people? Does it pose a danger to yourself and your own growth? Things like that. And that's all stuff that you have to decide. Nobody here can like tell you how to make your channel, or what's good for your channel, or what's not, or whatever, or what you should and shouldn't do. It's all a moral thing. Moral is a spectrum for everyone. What's going to be good for some is not others. But I think that is like not only part of why your channel has grown, but also why people maybe experience some of the emotional reaction that they do. Right. And that's just like my outsider opinion. Take that for whatever you will. But there have been two things that have been mentioned here that I really want to touch on. Like, really, if we need to like finish dissecting this and give Swami a chance, we can do that. But we cannot lose sight of the S&P 500 comment, because I do want to comment on it. And there was a point where Nostalgia asked Jake, do you think what you are doing is replicable? And then there was another point where Nostalgia, you said that the video content you make is your experience and what you have done and experienced, not necessarily what you think everyone else could experience. Now, you didn't say that second part. That's what I inferred. That what the content you're making is what you have experienced in the hobby. Is that fair? Like that what you're making is your experiences. So, and then you asking Jake if what he talks about and whether or not people can replicate it, a lot like that to me opens up the bigger Pandora's box of a lot of this stuff that gets discussed, one of the big things I'm about is transparency. I think having disclaimers, trying to show people the full picture as much as possible, and I understand there's limitations to doing that, to show people not just this is what I think and why I think it in X, Y, and Z, but to hopefully allow people to understand that maybe my circumstance is different than theirs for X, Y, and Z reason, and that maybe it isn't replicable for whatever reason, right? I would not expect, and maybe this is, I'm just expecting too much out of people. I would not expect to watch Jake's channel or Swami's channel or anyone's channel and expect to just be able to one-to-one replicate anything. But I don't think we can necessarily assume that everyone is going to be able to come to that conclusion. And so I think that's a broader conversation that should be had. Like, and after I talk about the S&P 500 thing, you guys can take any of these and just talk about them. But I think that's a broader conversation to be had, is what is a healthy way to talk about these topics in a fashion where you can demonstrate to other people on the other side of the screen, this is why I think this thing, this is why I think it can happen, but maybe it can only happen for me or a select amount of people or people in this vantage point or this position based on X, Y, and Z reason, so that not every single person on the other side of the screen just assumes that it's going to be them, and then they go do these things that aren't replicable, can't be repeated, or would not have worked for them, and that's when they get themselves in a bad boat. So I just think that's like a topic that's not discussed enough, that it kind of sounded like at certain points maybe it was being discussed and then wasn't being discussed, and so yeah. But the S&P 500 thing is the one I really want to talk about. And we don't have to go super deep on this, but Jake very clearly does not agree with that statement, period. And I actually am more on the fence with that one, and I'll tell you why. I think it depends on what you're discussing. So like Nostalgia, you say Pokemon can outpace the S&P 500. I actually first heard about collectibles outpacing the S&P 500 from Lego. That's like a really big narrative that's been strung not just in Lego communities, but across Forbes, across some of these major platforms. But if you take your average Walmart Lego set, that is just strictly absolutely not true and never will be true. If you take the top 10 sets, top 20 sets, maybe even top 10% of sets over the last 25 years for Lego, they probably have outpaced the S&P 500. I would argue if you take the top 10 Pokemon products, top 20 Pokemon products, or maybe top 3% of Pokemon products, they probably have also outpaced the S&P 500, to where what you said is not inherently false, Nostalgia, but it's not an across the board, full spectrum, just blanket, Pokemon beats the S&P. And I would say the same for Lego. Lego doesn't just blanket beat. And I think the question comes down to is, can you beat the S&P 500 in pop culture collectibles, whether it be Lego or Marvel or Disney or Pokemon? And for most of these, the answer is probably yes, if you can somehow segment out and select out that top 10 items, 20 items, 3%. And the question comes down to, can anyone realistically and consistently do that? And I'm not sure the answer to that is yes. And maybe it is. Maybe like it all comes like,
I got some data. So you're right. You're right. I got some data. I just learned about this week, actually. So the top 100 cards in sports outpaced the S&P. It tracked fairly decently with the S&P, but it started beating the S&P consistently in 2015. The top 2,500, from 101 to 2,500, never beat the S&P until 2020. So that's the top 2,500 cards in sports, a much more established hobby than Pokemon. And yes, if you're in that top 3%, Reserved Investments is amazing to me that he is like seems the most bearish on these collectibles. But this is something he said too. Go for the best of that hobby. And this is sports. The top 2,500 cards did not beat the S&P going back to 2009 until 2020. But the top 100 did. And that includes your most expensive cards, which I think is the important part. Because if we're going to talk investing, collecting is one thing. But if we're going to talk like investing, any sort of consistency of having your money make you more money, I think you have to consider this. But go ahead.
Okay, but what I would counter you with on that is those top 100 are not static. It's going to be static within a time frame of whenever you take that segment of data and then take your top 100% gainer, like your top 100 cards, those percent gainers. If you then take another 10-year additional snapshot, those could drastically change because growth is not linear, right? And so eventually percentage growth cannot remain consistent, right? Your card can't double up year after year after year in perpetuity. It just can't happen. So again, it comes down to, do you have the ability to read the variables, read the time frame, stay rational within the market, and continue to peg the top 100 or top X percent over a period of time, and then continue to replicate that? For almost every single human being, that answer is going to be no. Even the people that dedicate their lives to it. You may get it within one frame, but to get it every single time, for most, it's always going to be the S&P 500 because it can be consistent. It can be replicable. And
Yes.
I'm just not convinced. Like, I guarantee if you take that same snapshot on the same time frame, moving forward, and we were to go to however long it is, 25 years, 50 years, whatever, and we were to then do that again in 50, I would venture to guess most, if not all of that 100 will not be on that list again. Meaning that you would have to then figure out again the same 100. And again, I'm not saying it's not possible. But so when I hear people say things like, can it beat the S&P 500? Yes. I would suspect, depending on macroeconomics, things like this could, right? You said they started trending up in 2015. Well, I would argue that's when the macro economy, global economy, started to also heal and get better and really start to mature. If that was a downtrending economy, it was 2007 to 2014. That list may be 5 cards, right? It may not be like, so a lot of that time frame matters, the macro matters. And that's the problem, is people want to take that data set then and say you can beat the S&P 500 all the time. And even if you can find the 100, but maybe those 100 can only beat, any 100 can only beat in X timeframes. And so like, it's a really misleading statistic to ever say that. And that's why like I couldn't believe Forbes ever reported on that for Lego, because like it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying that it's not something worth considering of like how someone would go about trying to figure that out, but to just blanket say like, can you beat the S&P 500 investing in Pokemon? I mean, you could beat the S&P 500 investing in meteorites with the right data set and the right time frame and the right, like, it just...
Not what we're asking, right? We're asking what's the better investment.
I'll answer it. I mean,
risk.
What's the... Okay, you're saying based on risk, though. Well, your risk is like, you can literally just, like, it's always going to be based on risk. The S&P is better. Always. Always. Because, again, your statistical likelihood of being able to pigeonhole that X percentage that can consistently be in each era, it's just extremely unlikely. I've never known anyone in this hobby, some of the brightest minds, Charlie, TCA, Gem Mint, Pratt, none of these guys, I don't think could consistently do that over thousands of years. In any collectible, I just don't think it's possible.
Can I make a point to that?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's because what I'm talking about is not, it's kind of like I talked about the first 5-year, the trajectory of products in those times. So what I'm talking about is not that same style of like looking at those sports cards and seeing how they performed over their lifetime. Okay, so yeah, if you bought products and just held them forever, probably not. If you bought products at, maybe after release under retail, right? And you held them in sometime in that 5 years, I truly believe you're going to be able to make better gains than the S&P. You're going to be able to take those profits, roll them back into another product, and continue to rinse and repeat that method. And so basically an actively managed fund compared to like an actively managed hedge fund, or instead of like a, S&P, I feel like you're going to do better than just buying something and holding it. So just right. I mean, Sun and Moon, XY, look at Sword and Shield already. So that S&P, all the markets are down this year. You have Battle Styles, Fusion Strike, Chilling Reign. Like they're still a little down. They're starting to get back to where you'd be even. The rest of the sets, Sword and Shield base, you're way up. Rebel Clash, you're way up. It goes down the list. Like there's home runs, like Evolving Skies. Brilliant Stars is up. Celebrations, you're doing well. So it's like if you bought, a box from every single set, you're doing better right now in Sword and Shield than the S&P is right now. If you wanted to sell out right now, so it's. I mean, I just think over time, if you continually actively manage your investments, you are going to continuously beat the S&P. Now, if you just buy them and let them sit forever, maybe not.
And if you had talked to me 2 to 3 years ago, you would have been completely wrong.
No way. Sun and moon and XY, no way.
Way in that period, in that 4 to 5, in that 4-year period before everything went up, did way worse than the stock market during that period. Way worse, Alex, considerably.
Oh, pre-2019, you mean?
Yeah. From like 2017 to 2019.
But what about from 2017 until now? They've outperformed.
But this might have been the biggest growth in Pokemon history that may never be reproducible again. The point of pop culture collectibles.
But it's still happening.
What do you mean? Because Evolving Skies? Yeah, no,
Sword and Shield as a whole has performed better in the past year than the S&P has in this year. This is after the boom. This is after the crash.
We are still in a boom. This is completely still a boom, in my opinion. So, and we don't know, but like
Battle Styles, Killing Rain, and Fusion Strike sitting under $90 is a boom.
The only reason is because they printed so much. If they hadn't reprinted all of it, it would have gone up quite a bit. You know, again, it's all about supply and demand. There's so much more demand right now than there was before. So I could definitely not sit here and say that Alex is going to be wrong. And this goes back to exactly the conversation that I would have had with Nav, or it's like one person saying it's definitely better, or it's better, maybe not definitely better, but it's better. And then me saying it's too risky, so it's not as good. But it doesn't mean that it can't happen. And I want people to hear this very clearly. It's a risk assessment. Now, it's not I can predict the future and I know it's going to happen. Now, I think doing this right now is not stupid. I don't think what Alex is doing is stupid. I actually think that it could definitely work out. Okay. And I'm doing it a little bit. Now, I'm still mostly investing in the stock market and safer things, but I'm doing a little bit. But again, it's also because it's fun, right? So we have to go back to this. But it just telling people that pop culture collectible investing, that anyone is capable of predicting things, or cherry picking 3 years or 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, it just makes me very uncomfortable. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm completely wrong, Alex, and you can just be like, that's not fair, that's wrong. But like, and maybe it's just how I was brought up, in these markets, and I'm, but it's so like, I don't know, was I some sort of genius that I saw this coming? Like, was I, because I was telling my friends, I cannot believe how cheap these items are and how popular Pokemon and pop culture, or did I just get extremely lucky? And was it stupid that I put so much money in it and I just got really, really lucky? I'll never really know the answer to that. I think because it was so cheap, obviously it worked out extremely well, but because it was so cheap, it was probably a good move by me. But it was, but I was aware of how risky it was. And I knew it was extremely risky, and it's more risky now. It's a lot more risky now than it was.
And I don't think you got lucky. I think you got lucky on the amount you made, but I don't think you got lucky on your overall view. Maybe you wouldn't have made hundreds and thousands of %, but I think you were right to think that because of what these mean to people, because of people our age moving back in, that these are going to rise in value, because I had the same exact mindset. I didn't go as hard as you. I didn't make as much as you. And we obviously got lucky with the amount that we made, but I don't think it's luck to, we created our own luck. We saw a trend. We saw the markets moving. We saw people our age moving back into this stuff. We saw the popularity growing. So we moved money in. Now, obviously no one saw thousands of % coming, but we saw a rise in value coming.
I never did. I've always said I've respected Jake a lot because he saw it coming. I was buying because I really just genuinely like the stuff. If I'd have seen this coming, shoot, I would have been buying so much more. I was actually just collecting, and I had a very big collection. And I do want to ask about Sword and Shield beating the S&P, because that is just not possible. What are the prices on Sword and Shield? Like, if you bought a box, give me an example, because
take a booster box of every set.
Hold on. Are you factoring in shipping, taxes, everything?
It's because the market has fallen so much too, Swami, recently. That's the market that's part of why it works.
So I have no idea what the modern prices are, but I need to hear some numbers.
It wouldn't work if the stock market was flat, but because the stock market, is not flat, it works. Particularly if you're buying into the Nasdaq or something like that.
And I know it's even down over the last 4 or 5 months, right? But like, are you making any money in Sword and Shield? Like, to say that it's beating the S&P over the last 6 months, it's like whoop-de-doo. You're still not making any money on it. Like, can I get an example of this box price you could have bought here, and including shipping and taxes and everything, you're not just making a couple bucks?
Yeah. I mean, with shipping and fees, I did a video. I mean, you could have been up almost 40%, take out taxes. I mean, what did it bring down? Maybe 30% within this year. So 4 months.
But what box and what price?
UPC, Celebration ETBs, Evolving Skies ETBs, Battle Styles. I did a video if you bought all 4 of those at the beginning of the year or February. Right now, that's what you'd be at.
So what did you buy them for? You can just close it. So what did you buy them for?
So I got in like I said, everything is replicable. I don't have any inside sources, no distribution. Everything was bought off eBay or Facebook Marketplace. Average price on UPCs was $211. My average price on Celebrations was, I think, $475 a case. Evolving Skies ETVs was $375 a case, and Battle Styles was $78 a box.
And what are they at now?
UPCs are about $375. Celebrations cases of ETBs are about I think $630. The last one sold for, or no, that was, I forgot. It's on my channel. It's my last video. I broke it all down, all the numbers.
I mean, basically, to be completely honest with you, it's UPC and Evolving Skies. Everything else is close to flat, including ETBs when you consider the
Rebel
higher
Clash booster boxes, Sword and Shield booster boxes.
I wasn't including those, just the ones you were talking about. Rebel Clash and yeah, the pre sort of movement up, yeah. Champions Path after, not as much, but
can I just get clarification on what time frame we're talking about?
Oh, January, February of this year.
So we're doing year to date.
Well, yeah, he was asking,
like, if we took S&Ps today, year to date, like almost everything in Pokemon that is $1 more than what it came out as would be the S&P. But like,
well, no, not after shipping.
That's like not a realistic frame of like.
So I apologize. I really have to run. I know we're in the middle of this conversation. You guys could definitely take it to another channel. My girlfriend's going to kill me because we do dinner Friday nights, and I really have to go. I've already pushed it past.
Dinner.
Dude, thanks so much for having us on, bro.
45 minutes past what I should have. Here's
the chat.
Alex, respect you for just holding your opinion. It's a rough time for me to argue this because the numbers look good, right? And it's part of why, at the end of the day, it's a risk assessment. And there are going to be people out there who've listened to this and just do not find it compelling because they're like, well, Alex just quotes the numbers and the numbers show that it was better than the S&P during this period. And so that makes it better than the S&P going forward. Well, that's what it comes down to. And that's reasonable. I mean, what do you like? I actually don't really know how to argue against that other than I just think that pop culture collectibles, I think we're in this period of people in this hobby that we still have this irrational exuberance about like, and I think Rudy fuels this a lot, to be completely honest, that just like cardboard is this like, thing that just like everyone's going to want forever. And it's, it's this definite thing. And it makes me uncomfortable. It really does. I just, but it's not popular, it's an unpleasant opinion. I get that. And I can't sit here and back it up with short-term numbers. I can, pick dates where it would, contradict what you're saying. And then of course, what I can really do right now is to show you comics from the 1980s that haven't moved at all. And I can show you sports cards from the 1980s, 1990s that haven't moved at all or have gone down in value. And that's where I could come back and show you data points where even though these hobbies have exploded, items from these eras haven't gone up at all, particularly.
Let's do it.
I mean, I've given
this is probably one of your highest viewed lives. This is one of the greatest, like having real conversations where not everyone agrees is like actually the content that this hobby needs, instead of everyone just circle jerking each other and saying like, oh yeah, we're all right and we all love each other. Like this is what the hobby needs to hear. Literally. So let's pause it. You got to go to dinner and let's come back and chat another day. Like, I've got more I want to say. I think the growth that happened in the 25th anniversary would have looked just like the growth that happened in 2016 with Pokemon Go. And the additional boom growth we got, where Swami said, I didn't know it was going to go up. You know who did know it was going to go up? The influencers that manufactured it and pushed it up, that knew it was going to go up by their involvement in it and continued to go. But we can dissect all of that another day, but let's do it. Like, I have been having fun. I want to have more fun. I think Jake...
Great. This is not
great.
what have a good dinner.
This conversation with me.
All of that stuff makes me anxious. The business there's so many factors and variables, and it's, but I do want, yeah. Okay. You know what?
Yeah,
forget
go
it.
to dinner. This is gonna keep going forever. Hi Rock Pokemon. I didn't ignore you. I did see you. I just didn't want to interrupt them.
Thank you all for coming on. And yeah, well, I plan on doing a lot more sporadic lives like this and just bringing like people on from the chat and having conversations, and we could definitely get the four of us back together too and do it. But all right, I will thank you all for watching and for you guys coming on, and we'll see you all again soon.
Pleasure being on with you guys.